Good morning, everyone. We will call the January 19th, 2021 council work session to order. We have some service awards to start off. I am going to give a disclaimer early. I had back surgery 5 weeks ago. I'm only allowed to sit for 15-minute intervals, so you'll see me standing throughout this entire meeting a lot. So don't think I'm as weird as I am. So with that, let's start out with, for 20 years of service, Heather Parsons from our public communications.
Heather Parsons began her career at the City of Clearwater in January 2001 as a staff assistant in the Clearwater Fire and Rescue Department. In March of 2003, she was promoted to senior staff assistant in the Public Communications Department. During her time as a senior staff assistant, she also attended college at the University of South Florida to earn her bachelor's degree in English. In May of 2007, Heather was promoted to Public Information Specialist in the Public Communications Department, a title she held until October 2014, when she was promoted to Public Information Coordinator. Heather was promoted again in September of 2019 to Senior Public Information Coordinator, a title she holds today. Heather is currently an editor of the city's My Clearwater magazine, Sunshine Line's utility bill stuffer, and the city manager's Viewpoint newsletter. She supports a variety of communications and public relations functions for 5 city departments, including public utilities, engineering, utility customer service, solid waste recycling, and the Clearwater gas system. She also coordinates the writing of the City of Clearwater's annual report and is the organizer of the annual city's Citizens Academy program. There is rarely a printed piece that goes to the public where Heather hasn't fixed poor grammar, spelling, writing, and comma splices. If you have a grammar question, she is your go-to staff member. Outside of work, Heather is active in the local Palm Harbor Toastmasters group and has earned several achievements over the years. She also serves on the board of a local chapter of Public Relations Society of America. Congratulations to Heather Parsons on reaching this 20-year career milestone.
Thank you, Heather. We don't know if he's in the audience, but if Albert Craig Jr. could come forward from GAS for 25 years of service. All right, we will get his gift to him, even though Nicole wants to steal it, so.
Thanks.
Permanently borrowed.
Just kidding. Next, we have our bi-monthly team award for November-December 2020. Our off-duty trio. If I could call forward Donna Hemberger, Austin Denty, and Corey Lesden.
Donna Hemberger was driving to work when she was flagged down by a citizen on the side of the road that was walking by. This citizen alerted Donna that there was a male who had fallen into the street and appeared to be unconscious. Donna immediately called emergency services. At this time, Austin Dente, an off-duty Clearwater paramedic, who also just happened to be nearby, had noticed the activity and engaged Donna and the citizen. Austin began CPR on the unconscious male as Donna ran to the nearby public supermarket for an AED defibrillator. Sergeant Corey Linston arrived and took over chest compressions, allowing paramedic Dente to free up his hands in order to use the defibrillator to restore the male to consciousness. They continued to treat the patient until emergency services arrived. Thanks to Donna, Austin, and Corey for their quick action, a crisis was averted and handled to a best-case scenario. November, December 2020 bi-monthly team members.
Thank you all for jumping into action. We really appreciate it. It reflects well on our city. Next, I would like to call forward our firefighter, fire paramedic oaths for presentation. If I could call forward Julio Benet, Gregory Georges, Mason Marty, Sebastian Pickens, and Nicholas Stucker. Chief?
Morning, Mayor, Council. It's my, Scott Ellis, Fire Chief, Clearwater Fire Rescue. It's my pleasure to introduce you to and present to you our newest fire medics, and I will save one for the last if you give me a minute, in regards to what we just hired, and they graduated a few months ago. On your left, my right, starting with Julio Bonet. He is from Orange County, where he was a medic there for about a year. His hometown is Coconut Creek. Next to him is Gregory Georges. He's formerly from AMR in this area, did 2 years with AMR, and his former hometown is Coral Springs. Next to him is Mason Marty. He comes to us from the Naples EMS system, where he did 2 years as a medic down there. His hometown, I'm sure he's glad to be here, was Mounds View, Minnesota. So next to him is Sebastian Pickens, who comes from us as a hospital paramedic, where he spent 3 years. He's from Memorial Post Hospital in Pembroke Pines, and his hometown was Davie, Florida. And as I said, if while they're doing their oaths, just before we asked Rosemary to come up and do their oaths for fire medics, we did acquire from St. Pete, which was a great trade on our port. And that's from David Cato. He's our division chief of training. He comes to us from St. Pete, 19 years with St. Pete. And he's come to us from Highland, Michigan. He also was 6 years in the Army as a combat medic, and he has a tremendous amount of education and accolades that goes on and on and on. So with that, I would ask Ms. Rosemary to come up and offer them oaths.
Raise your right hand. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and the state of Florida and the charter and laws of the city of Clearwater, that I am duly qualified to hold office under the charter and laws of the city of Clearwater, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of fire medic on which I'm now about to enter.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Be safe out there.
Thank you, sir.
All right, with that, we will recess the work session and call to order the CRA. I would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the November 16th, 2020 meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. This time I'd ask if there are any citizens to be heard for the CRA. These are for items that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, item 4.1.
No, I do that one.
I'm sorry, there is one.
Please come on forward if you'd state your name for the record, and
Yeah,
if you
hi,
could keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, my name is Kathy Flaherty, and I came down to this time to address you in person. There are 3 things I think you guys should put on the agendas for future meetings. One is an update from the police. You guys have an interlocking agreement with them, the police department, how they're doing with the prostitution, the drug dealing, and the homelessness. I think that would be very helpful. I see that the Downtown Development Board has an update on their meetings, and I think the CRA, since they're paying for the program, that they should have an update so everybody in the community knows what's going on. Also, I think the Downtown Development Board should do an update as how they're spending the money that you guys gave them to do programs throughout the community, so I think that would be helpful, so we would know how those funds are being spent. And one other thing, I think there should be more physical management of the funds that go through the CRA. I asked, there's no one person on this board that's a treasurer, and I think there should be one board member that sort of oversees the monies. So when Amanda spends some money or the city manager spends some money, everybody knows that the money's being spent. So basically, a police update, Downtown Development Board update, and a treasurer report every month. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flaherty. Are there comments, Ms. Cole? Okay. Item 4.1.
Morning.
Good morning.
Oh, here we go. We'll ask for your patience this morning. We have several different presentations and videos that are being uploaded at the last minute that came in over the weekend. Let's see if we can get this full screen. Perfect. Okay, how is everyone? It feels like Monday, even though it's Tuesday. I will say, I'm Councilmember Brett Beckman. I did receive your questions. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to print them all out clearly, so I have some notes in here, but please, for all of you, as you have them, happy to answer those questions. So today, we're coming back to this conversation. We talked about this strategy in October of last year, which was a long time ago in 2020 terms, could have been 15 years ago. And the direction that I received was, we're good with what you've outlined here, but we'd like some more measurable objectives to start working with, much like we had in the previous strategy. So today, I just really want to focus on what those different objectives are, so then we can start moving forward with identifying in fine detail how we'll measure them, how we'll collect that data. But first, I want to make sure we're pointed in the right direction. So as a reminder, this is the adopted vision for downtown in your 2018 plan, and everything we do is really about implementing this vision in addition to restoring the functioning of the private market, which is the whole purpose of CRAs under state statute. And I did receive a question of, why is shifting the perception our biggest barrier? Why is that most important? And again, in our focus, we're about attracting private investment. We're about getting people to take a chance, whether that's come take a chance on a restaurant, come take a chance, attend an event, come take a chance, live here, come take a chance, invest your money, establish a business, right? And perception is the underlying thing that drives all of that. If you don't believe the city's committed, if you don't believe you can be successful here, then you're not going to spend your time or money. So while there are different barriers, of course, older buildings, right, or say maybe not enough population to support a certain kind of use, perception is the underlying issue that is our biggest barrier. Operationally, you see the list here of everything that we live under and what we're accountable to. I'm not going to go over that in detail, but just know that everything in this strategy works within these frameworks. So when I come to you with recommendations, it's because we've worked with legal, right? We've seen what other communities have done, and we're making sure we're within this legal framework. This is our boundary area. How we facilitate change. Again, the key takeaway here is we do not run businesses, and we do not fund individual businesses for one-off type purposes. We're really about expanding and growing infrastructure and a network, and telling the story about downtown that is not currently being told. Not every community has to work as hard to tell their story, because there's lots of different organizations that are sharing different points of view. That is not our case. That's why a key part of our operations is promoting a positive brand. Again, it takes everyone to revitalize a downtown. Next month, we're going to be bringing in 4 organizations that work on supporting businesses in downtown for you to learn more about their efforts and how the CRA will intersect with them. In March, we're going to be bringing in nonprofit organizations, St. Vincent de Paul, Clearwater Arts Alliance. So those organizations, how they fill in the gap on other non-business related issues. But everything we do here, we partner with all of these groups. We are inviting in all of these groups. They're all critical to our success overall as downtown. Impacts on CRA operations. So what I'm proposing is a 2-year plan, which is the blink of an eye in downtown redevelopment lifespan. But we do need to pull together and focus. And we know that these issues will continue to impact our operations. Right? COVID-19 is not over yet. We know it's going to get better. We know we have major construction projects going on throughout the length of the CRA in the next 2 years, which is wonderful, but also has its impacts. We know there will be an election coming up. We've got the referendum. And then we also know, thankfully, we've received approval from the county for that workforce housing for South Washington, and we're hoping that there's other continued funds out there for public space improvements and for workforce housing. So 3 focus areas in the wide variety of activities that we do, really falling under 3 buckets: creating and sharing authentic, positive stories about downtown, increasing investor confidence, and investing in placemaking and placekeeping. So within each of these areas, and this is where I'll spend the bulk of my time, is we're going to have very specific objectives, right? So that you know what my staff and I are doing, right? We can communicate to people who are seeking grants what we'd like them to work on. So we're just very clear in our communication about what we're investing our time and resources in. 1, increasing the number and diversity of individuals producing community engagement activities and special events downtown. Now, we know we're not going to have large special events anytime soon. What this looked like before is we predominantly funded Blast Fridays. And Blast Fridays were wonderful, and they served a great purpose. But that took up the bulk of the CRA's funding, and it was a very specific type of experience. So when we talk about different individuals in different organizations, we're talking about how do we build that infrastructure, whether through our grant agreement with Amplify to help with the permitting process, or directly funding other types of organizations or other ideas so that you have a wide variety of events. We don't have a set plan today of, we want 1 street market, we want 2 dog shows, we want 3 large-scale garden installations. We haven't gotten that specific. What we'll do is work to have a program of how do we communicate we're open to these ideas, right, which we've done already with a call for ideas with Amplify, but with COVID, we've only received 1 or 2 applications where we really want more, like 20 or 30. And then we'll figure out what should we be funding or who should we be funding, a la Jazz Holiday Foundation, right, to take over Station Square for smaller distance concert series. So has everyone any questions about that objective?
Let's get questions at the end.
Okay, will do. 2, increase the overall audience size and engagement with our electronic communications channels. Rosemary DeMoore will be here in February to give you an in-depth overview of all of our marketing and public relations experts and take you through the website and email numbers as deep as you want to go. Establish a resident engagement program to build community-wide support for downtown redevelopment goals and businesses. The gap that we see today is many of our residents feel disconnected from downtown. Why would I come downtown? There's nothing for me there. Haven't been downtown in years, right? And we're in competition with Dunedin, Safety Harbor, downtown St. Pete. Many times because of the shape of Clearwater, a Clearwater resident might be physically closer to Dunedin or Safety Harbor, which means we have to work that much harder to get them to make the drive. So we want to start intentionally building on those relationships to get more people understanding why downtown's important, what's here for them, and advocating for it. And this just reminds us that word of mouth is still the #1 way people find out information. So what those actions look like: targeted marketing campaigns, right? Sentiment analysis, where we look at our comments on social media, are they positive, negative, or neutral? And the Downtown Champions program is taking through, much like we did the tour with the Citizens Academy, really finding those residents who are open to becoming champions for downtown and building those relationships and engaging them. Today, there is no volunteer database for downtown. It doesn't exist. And people say to me all the time, like, oh, how can I help? What can I do? And I can say, well, you can come support a restaurant, you can attend an event, but it ends there. And successful communities, they have a way to harness and engage all of those volunteers and that goodwill on a regular basis. And that might be something we do directly. That might be something we pay another organization to do. Not going to spend a long time on this, but from a CRA staff perspective, we are still focused on smaller scale events that comply with public safety protocol. And we're doing what we can to leverage the Cleveland Street closure. And the Downtown Development Board is a big part of this in funding the DCMA and their activities with the district. And that's just deeper dive on sentiment analysis. Okay, increasing investor confidence. So 4 objectives here: attracting $50 million in private investment. And I had the question, well, the original goal was $100 million, what happened? And a large part of the original housing goal and the investment goal was with the understanding that we would have had the RFP issued for the Bluff properties. Also that we would have received ideas that we were okay with, proposals for the South Washington site and the Economy Inn site. And those things did not happen, which I'm not gonna go into why here. It was aggressive, but they didn't happen, and that was the bulk of that. But what did happen is the Nolan was purchased by a private company during that time for around $40 million. And you'll hear more from the Nolan representatives today about why they purchased the property, their expertise in managing mixed use and luxury apartment properties across Ohio and Florida, and their next steps for that property. Two, right, getting to development agreements, and this has changed from permitting to development agreements. In my previous life, I was overall the permitting and zoning in the local government, so I know that, until it has a permit, it's not really real, but that process here is totally out of my control. And it's a much bigger place and a longer process. So I think for us, what I recommend and you guys decide is actually a development agreement. And that's really where our role in it kind of begins, has the most impact. So we are well on our way to this already, and we control the property. We can make the deals, and you guys sign off on that approval. So that's something that I know we can have success in moving forward. Building operational capacity of a minimum of 3 downtown business or community advocacy organizations. When you look back again at that listing of everyone who needs to be involved, we do not have enough people involved in downtown revitalization. We don't. So we want to find that intersection between what our CRA program needs and what other organizations we can help fund to implement those programs, and therefore build the capacity of those organizations. And again, the amount of people who are advocating and working in downtown. It shouldn't just be us, right? The vision and everything has to come from a wide group of people. And fourth, in response to the concerns around vacancy, reducing the number of ground floor vacant commercial buildings by 10%. And so this necessitates an inventory, which we have one that's about 1.5 years. So it's a little bit out of date, but not too far off. So updating our inventory of vacant spaces, and then targeting right through whether it's facade grants, other kinds of incentive grants, other programs that we're going to come up with, right, to reduce that vacancy. I think 10% is a reasonable amount given our current economy and what it costs to rehab spaces. So, these are all the different things that investors are looking for as they come and judge a space. You guys know this, I don't need to beat you over the head with it, but just, this is what we're thinking about and measuring and what we're asked to respond to. They're going to look at the lease rate compared to other places, which is where, frankly, we're favorable to St. Pete and Tampa because we're more affordable. They're going to look at the experiences to current businesses, what land and buildings are actually available, our zoning entitlements in place, right? And then what's the foot traffic and vehicular traffic like? Because I can share our wonderful experiences all day long, right? But if they say, well, if you don't have enough cars coming by for me to take this risk, then, that's going to be a hard no. What causes persistent vacancy in Clearwater? There's a wide variety of reasons that all cross and overlap, and that we are working on, untangling, right, that big, messy ball of string. A lot of investors don't know about downtown, right? Maybe some do regionally, certainly not nationally. They know about Clearwater Beach, but they don't know about downtown. Land value is worth more than the building. And this can happen as an unintended consequence of higher density zoning. So it makes financial sense for an owner to hold out for assembly and demolition versus putting in the money to build out a space. And we have a couple spaces downtown that would meet this category. They say, well, why build now? If I wait 5 years, if I wait 10 years, I'll quadruple and sell the land, right? And I'll make more than I would make by investing in a business. The way that you can counter that is you can prohibit demolition. And there's a lot of processes and rules and regulations around that, but that's really the only thing you can do if the land's more valuable than the building itself. Lender not willing to finance because costs of rehabilitation exceed the revenue a tenant will be able to generate. The build out, just the build out alone for Clear Sky was $1.2 million. Just the build out. And that's not fees, that's not signage on top of that, that's not staff salaries, that's not insurance, that's not your liquor license. So if you want that kind of product, you're looking at a $1.2 million investment. The owner wants a higher lease or sale amount than the market will support. You're unable to attract tenants or buyers with financial resources, and that happens to us a lot, right? We have a lot of tenants who say, I have a great idea, you know, CRA, can you pay for everything? Right, I can't necessarily get a loan. Owner can afford to wait or is highly risk adverse. And as we talked about, that most of our vacant buildings need significant renovation. So these are barriers, right? Large barriers, but many of them can be addressed through perception change, right? You increase the value of the market, you implement the park redevelopment, right? And you have a robust series of programming down there that are bringing a lot of people down. We have the food and drink grant program. Almost the entire 400 block has received grants in some form or fashion from the CRA. And that is working now, right? That is proving our market, that is upping the market value, that is upping the foot traffic, right? So as we do more to increase demand and show that things work, then you'll start to change some of these perceptions and numbers, what you can get for lease rate or willingness to lend. So here, wide variety of programs. The two big things to point out here is we'll keep focusing on CRA properties and getting those back into tax-paying private market situations. And then we're going to come forward with a series of programs in February for you related to business assistance, what I like to think of as small, medium, and large. Small being like your external makeover, right? So painting, a new door, a new window, not as intense as the facade program, but things that just improve visual appearance. So address blight through improving the visual appearance. Medium being something like a Second Century Studios build out, which is around $60,000 just to put in your ADA bathrooms, your basic, you know, electrical, HVAC, plumbing services, and then larger build outs that'll be a larger amount of money. And this is just one of our spaces that's for sale now. Go through here. Okay, placemaking and placekeeping. This is, again, about improving the market, and this is something that the CRA and the city can do, and not really a lot of other people can do or would have any point in investing in unless they're just pure philanthropy. Capital improvement projects are the Streetscape Phase 3, and the Mercado. Those are identified capital improvement projects now, along with the wayfinding signage. So we'd like to develop 3 signature placemaking programs with a focus on children, downtown employees, and the intersection of art and technology. We'll continue with the augmented reality partnership with USF. It was delayed due to COVID, but now they are all back on campus, or at least the staff is, so that's moving forward and should be released soon. And these are things maybe CRA will develop in-house, or maybe we'll pay a nonprofit organization to develop and produce and implement these programs. But these are 3 areas that, you know, we want to activate our downtown employees so that they stay for happy hour and dinner, right? That's a captured population once they come back. We want to invite in more children, right, as a way of connecting more Clearwater residents to downtown, whether with your grandchildren or your children. And then the intersection of art and technology is unique for us. It's unique for this area, and it's something that's not only, you know, visually beautiful, but again speaks to our downtown employee population and tech companies. And then finally, improve the physical appearance of blighted residential and commercial properties. I remind you, this is a 2-year plan. We are not going to get to residential properties most likely this year, but we are working. We're having preliminary conversations with Chalk Lane, right, with our housing, with planning, with codes enforcement to say what are the biggest issues in the CRA and how can our grant funding potentially address them. So, and this is just a list of, in here of all the different projects that would fall under this area. So every day and every day way, are we changing the perception of downtown? That's our guiding focus. So with that, I will pause. And happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Questions? Vice Mayor?
I got a couple of questions, and then I've got some comments. What is the status of the Mercado, the intersection of Cleveland, Gulf to Bay, the nice thing that we looked at about a year ago?
Yes. So that project's being implemented by the engineering department. The RFP for construction services is out now, and they anticipate having responses back in 45 days, I think it would be at this point. So then we'll select that winning bidder, and you will see dirt turning in June. Whether they're gonna start at the Missouri or at the Highland end, I'm not sure. That'll be decided by the contractor, but we'll have a very specific timeline in June. And then we'll move forward with hiring the artists that'll work with the community for the community art kind of wall portion of it. So, June.
Okay, but the pavilion at the corner of Cleveland, Gulf to Bay, is that already set, or is that still going out to the community to firm up what that's gonna?
No, the trustees have approved that design, and it will be built at the same time as the streetscape.
Okay.
The only undecided portion is the community-led art project that will be contained within the plaza.
Okay, so you're saying June would be start of it?
That is my understanding.
Okay. You know, it's we've tried a lot of things, and I understand why that we want to concentrate in the core, because instead of spreading our money out within the whole region, years ago we said we're going to go ahead, and the DDB was the same way. We're going to really get the core, get the spark going in the core. And so that's where all our concentration has been. And, you know, it's been very difficult. I mean, we've been talking about this a long time. We thought that getting feet on the street would be a good thing. And, you know, Ruth Ecker was very, I think, successful in the events that we had down there. Brought a lot of people down, and we considered it successful. But what happens is they wouldn't come between the time they'd have the events, and that was frustrating, because we'd like, well, what is there to come down for? I think this last year has been hard with the pandemic, but you know, there's a silver lining in some things, and one of the silver linings, I think, that I've seen is the closure of Cleveland, and that has really sparked a lot of interest in people. And I'll tell you what, it's almost during the week you see as many people as used to come down on the weekends during the weekdays, and then the weekends are very crowded down. I mean, I know crowd is not a good term to use right now, but it's spread out. You got the restaurants all working together, serving people outside, which is, you know, if I go out, that's where I'm going to go to have dinner. And I think a lot of people think that way, and it's been very successful. So, you know, I think we got to be thinking about how that all plays in when we're doing our strategic plan from now on. We got a pretty good start on it. So I know these grant programs that we've had, you know, have been slow coming, but now we're starting to see restaurants open, and that's a good thing. We actually have a lot of things downtown now that are open, and that's the part that we need to get out to the public and say, hey, we've got things open now. Now the 400 block is, I mean, it's almost all open. 500 we need to work on, and 600's got some, you know, we still need to work on those two blocks, but if we get downtown, if we get the core popping, then I think everything will go out from that point in the entire CRE district. I feel real good about that, so I just wanted to say that for the record.
Well, there's 7 restaurants alone on the 400 block. That was a dream 15 years ago, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, I have a number of questions that I had sent to you ahead of time, Amanda, so you've touched on a couple. But one thing that you mentioned today in your presentation is, one of my questions was, what is the Downtown Champions? What was that a reference to? And so you explained champions, people who will be champions of downtown, and we need help in finding residents who will champion downtown. We need some kind of database of people willing to work for downtown. And I would say, you know, speaking for myself, in campaigning throughout the city, I have a number of people that I think would step up and be a downtown champion, or we should ask, and especially people who don't live downtown, you know, as you knock doors in Countryside or Skycrest or Lake Bellevue, and they care about downtown as well. So I would, you know, I'd volunteer to give you a list of names that you could reach out to, or I'll reach out to them first and see if they might want to help, you know, with that kind of initiative. And I would, you know, challenge my peers to offer people too that you might know that would be willing to help with that. I'm a big proponent of measurables with our objectives, and so, you know, you mentioned about reducing the vacant storefronts by 10%, and I had asked, you know, what does that look like? So we don't have a solid number on the vacant storefronts yet, or?
Not updated as of today.
Okay, so that'll be, you know, coming. And then I had a question about increasing the number and diversity of individuals and organizations producing community engagement activities. And, you know, I'm a huge proponent of diversity, so are we talking about, you know, age and types of, and, you know, what do we, anything's open? Everything.
Anything's
Right. Okay. And then, yeah, and then establish that resident engagement program kind of goes hand in hand with the downtown champions. And I think my question was, you know, we want residents from throughout Clearwater to help engage and give feedback. Because really, we have a lot of tourists that come, but we want our residents to come downtown, to our downtown rather, or in addition to Dunedin or Safety Harbor or wherever. Okay, the engagement strategy. Okay, yeah, I had a question too about attracting the $50 million in private investment. And I wanted to know so our original goal was $100 million in private investment. What have we met? How close are we?
In the last kind of 3-year period, it's been around between 10 and 15 million.
Okay, all right.
But what I'm referring to when I talk about private investment is new businesses, rehabilitation of properties, you know, purchasing something like the purchase of the Nolan, right? Purchasing of an operational business, or you build something, not just pure change in ownership with no change.
Okay. And then you've got staff the downtown, the DDB, and that means provide your staff for their use, right? So that's an
Correct.
expense. Do you have an expense associated with that, or?
We're paid approximately $76,000 a year for that time.
Okay.
And that's simply in here, it wasn't before, but it is to capture that it does take staff time.
Yeah.
And it is also an additional source of funding that, you know, we help recommend and facilitate and guide as a CRA staff, making sure that DDB and CRA align, but we do want to capture that effort. It is effort.
I like the idea of supporting the Clearwater Community Gardens and whether or not we would expand that, because I know Bill Poulin is interested in like a children's garden. For one of the objectives on 3C, we've got improve the physical appearance of blighted residential and commercial properties. And when I toured the CRA area with you and I, you know, it's your gut instinct, mine too. It's like, well, let's just clean this up. You wash the windows and put a fresh coat of paint and stick, you know, a hanging flower out there or something to make it look nicer. But, you know, are we how much money are we thinking of putting towards that? And do you reward property owners that let it get blighted and run down?
So Howard Smith, the business assistance administrator, he's in a multi-month process that'll be wrapping up, and you'll see the results of in February of, you know, direct interviews, site visits, surveys, monthly meetings with the commercial focus. So not residential yet, but those commercial businesses, especially in the downtown gateway. And we're pulling together those costs. And that's really a policy decision, because sometimes you have property owners that can't or aren't willing to invest funds, but you have a tenant who said, I'm willing to pay for the building to be painted, I'm willing to redo the landscaping, put on a new door, a new sign, and do we want to assist that tenant or not? Our focus will stay on the exterior, and mostly what's visible from the public right-of-way, because it meets our goal by increasing investor confidence, right? If I drive down the street and I'm like, this place looks like people care and it's nice, I'm more likely to invest. Now, that investor is not thinking, did I reward or punish bad behavior of a property owner? So where we're at today, our recommendation is we want to find a nice middle ground of partnering with people who are willing to invest. But we are not going to come to you and advocate, we pay all liens and fines, we, just make everything okay, if you've had a long history of neglect. So we'll have to get a sense of what amount of money you're comfortable with. But, there's a lot you can do for, repainting a property for a smaller building is not so exorbitant a cost for the impact that it could have visually, the positive impact.
And then I had a question about that commission, the design for the Cleveland Street lighting project. Is that, that's not just seasonal, that would be a year-round lighting project?
This would be, so where the idea was left is that this would be a year-round immersive light installation. Because of travel restrictions right now, the team in Canada cannot travel to the US without extensive amount of quarantining once they return to Canada. So it's really on pause. We're going to wait till it's safe to travel again, because what we've heard from our various stakeholders is they want to talk to designers directly, and they want designers on the ground to see our unique situation. So I don't think it's going to be effective to have Zoom calls and walk around with my phone and get things on video. I think they need to be here in person. So we'll circle back to that when it's safe to travel again.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Bunker.
Oh.
That's you.
Good morning.
So I have heard from someone who's picked up on my Scientology tourism idea, and they're actually, they formed an LLC and they're going to put that into action. What I've heard is that some notable former members have volunteered to come in and do some tours. Like for a week, you'd have one person that you've seen on Leah Remedi's Scientology in the aftermath, and then next week it may be somebody different. But if we can have 2 tours a day with people stopping and dining at the restaurants, I think that might be helpful.
I mean, I would ask, how would that change the perception of downtown?
That there's something happening down there?
So another activity to do.
Yeah. Educational.
Right, so the format in which an idea like this, or any idea in terms of programming, it's something the CRA can produce directly. It's something someone could ask for a grant request as a one-off, or we can work on establishing, kind of like we have with Amplify, a more open grant program that says you turn in your idea, here's some funding parameters, and we fund you to implement an idea. But those would all come back before you to make the decision.
Mr. Horn.
Yes, Mayor, Council, Councilmember Bunker, I want to ask you this question. So you are suggesting, based on what you said, that we would then reach out to the Church of Scientology and ask them to participate in a program that would allow tours in their facilities?
No.
Okay, well then, could you explain?
It would be about the history of Scientology here in Clearwater. I realize Scientology wouldn't let anyone inside the buildings. But you can talk about, Project Normandy and the whole history of how Scientology came to Clearwater. It kind of changed the perception, and now we're changing it back.
Okay, I just needed, it wasn't clear exactly what.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I don't expect any participation from Scientology itself.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Bunker.
No, I think the big concern is how do we get something in those empty buildings? You know,
I'm going next.
I don't have any solid ideas. I did mention to you that I talked to one person who wants to bring an ice cream shop downtown. And we'll see if we can get individuals like that. But if we've got people who are sitting on their buildings and purposely not leasing them, that's a big problem to overcome.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, I want to put a little more positive spin on some things here. You talk about the last 2-3 years, we've probably had $10 to $15 million worth of investment. We're looking for 50, on the real high end, we're looking for 100. I want people to understand, we're getting close to the point, we've all met with Gina Clayton in the planning department. We're looking at an opportunity to increase the FAR and increase the density of properties. And I think when we get that work product done, that you're going to see a lot more interest in investments in this in our city, in our downtown, in our CRA district for that type of thing. So, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm not afraid of where we're headed. So, as long as I've only got 14 more months here, but I hope to see a lot of great things in the next 14 months because. We are getting very close to getting these things done.
Okay. Couple things. Well, quite a few things. I'd love to get the last number you had on percentage of vacant properties, first of all.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. We want to get an update on that, but I'd like to find out what the current number is. I'd love to see a 10% increase with that, but I want to know how many properties are vacant to see if I believe that's really a realistic number.
Okay.
I'd like to know, I think, when we talk about ambassadors for downtown, I think it ought to be people that live outside of downtown, and obviously the bulk of our population lives outside of downtown. But I also know that there's people that literally live in Dunedin and Safety Harbor and Bel Air who grew up in Clearwater, and they're interested in what happens in downtown. I don't think we should be as limited as just Clearwater residents. If we're doing that, we're being foolish. St. Pete draws from elsewhere. Dunedin certainly draws from Clearwater. We should not limit those boundaries. I want to address a couple things that Ms. Flaherty brought up. The CRA does pay for 2 extra officers, but those are not the only officers in downtown Clearwater. Downtown Clearwater is a part of District 2, and so we have a lot of other police officers that are downtown. The CRA just supplements with 2 additional officers, and that was a decision we made years ago. I just want to point that out. What are your thoughts on overseeing all of the DDB spending?
I think there are appropriate mechanisms in place that monitor the DDB spending at this point. I mean, our finance department administers their finances. Every funding the decision they make is in a public hearing and is posted in advance. They adopt annual budgets according to the same state laws that you do as city council and as the CRA. So we can always work to make information more easy to understand and more accessible, but they are administering every expenditure directly.
Okay. Any comments on that, Ms. Aiken?
No, sir.
Okay. Couple other things. When you talk about the 50 million in investment in downtown, what is your trigger for saying that 50 million is it a development agreement like you brought up earlier? Is it an occupation, is it a CO? So that people are actually moving into something? Do they have to break ground on a project? What is the definition of investment?
Yes, so we're looking at business tax receipts, right? So new businesses and permitting numbers, so what construction and rehabilitation, new construction and rehabilitation has happened in downtown. Something like the South Washington project, right, a $28 million, $35 million project. Total project cost to go and build that. Same for the Blue Sky project. As well as if we happen to, land any philanthropic investments. Right, if someone comes in, meeting with the curator for the Clyde Butcher Gallery next week, right? So even those smaller kind of shows and exhibitions and events where it's not the CRA funding, it completely, maybe it's 50-50 or 70-30, or it's 100% funded by someone else. So looking across a wide range, but actual dollars, not volunteer time.
I understand that, but I mean, if the Washington project breaks ground, are you booking that as money spent?
Yes.
Or do they need a CO?
From our angle, probably the development agreement and breaking ground. If we're gonna wait for CO, that would be out of the 2-year time period or very close to the end of it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Because if all we're looking for is a development agreement, I think 50 million is a very low bar by December of 2022. At least, I hope it is.
I hope so.
We're talking about potentially referendums in March of 2022. And we're talking about the 3 properties being up in the RFP. I think, Water's Edge was a $105 million project when it was built. So I don't know that 50 million is the right number.
It might not be.
If it's the wrong number, we ought to find the right number.
So my further thought behind this is, what is the story that we're trying to tell with this number? And before it was 100 million, and then the story that gets written in the paper is, oh, you got nowhere near 100 million. Once again, you're a total failure, right? Even though we know there were legitimate reasons for that. With 50 million, I think it's achievable. It might be undershooting it a little if everything works out the way it's supposed to, but I'd rather say, wow, we did way better than that. Here's the things I think we can reasonably achieve within 2 years based on what's lined up. So I'm happy to increase the number and we can list out all those developments, but 2 years from now, I don't want to be in a position of backtracking and saying, well, this agreement got delayed and then this thing happened and that thing happened. Versus the point of this number is to really show the private market, this is what we want from you. We'd love even more, but at a minimum, here's the core things we're trying to accomplish, and this is the kind of investment that it's going to take.
I don't think the paper ought to determine what our agenda is. And I agree with a virtual cycle. But at the same time, I don't like setting goals that are so easily achievable. Frankly, if we don't have over 100, probably more like 150 in investment, under a development agreement process by December of 2022, in my opinion, we will have failed.
Well, and then maybe we look at separating out development agreement versus other kinds of investment.
Well, and I think to do it just in one raw number is a very unsophisticated way of doing it. I think we ought to be looking at micro goals that may be a lower bar, but are just as important as the mega projects. And I'm not going to belabor that any further, but also as I was going through all of the information, this isn't really for you, but more for Michael, I would like to see us have a viewing area somewhere of Imagine Clearwater once we break ground with a full schematic of what it's going to look like. I want people to be able to see and get excited about what's coming and be able to watch the process. For those who were around during Beach Walk, it was an amazing thing to watch throughout the entire process. And imagine Clearwater lends itself to being seen more than Beach Walk was, because it was kind of divided by the properties to the east, but that's something I'd like to see. I want to talk about grants for a second and how they're being implemented, because one of my concerns is we're giving the grant to the property owner because we put a lien on the property.
Correct.
And that's the only way we can ensure that we're going to get our money back should the business not function for 5 years or more,
That and/or personal guarantee.
which most of the folks aren't willing to do, right?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay. My concern is that the money isn't necessarily getting down to the business owner, and that all the improvements that are being made aren't being supplemented with the grant. And I'd really like to, and I have examples, I am not going to specify them on air, but I know that it has happened. And I know it is a very difficult process to make certain that, you know, the business owner who we're trying to incent to come into downtown is actually getting the money to help them establish the business. And so I think we need to do some work on that. I don't have the solution. So normally I don't like identifying a problem I don't have a solution to. But I will readily admit I don't have a solution for it, but I think we need to try to work towards one.
I think that we can require that the funds that we grant be expended for the improvements. We do require receipts before we pay out the funds, but we don't necessarily require that the property owner be the one that expend it.
Right.
We can work on that, but the relationship or the agreement between the property owner and the tenant, we're not a party to that.
And that's where the rub is.
It is.
So there's $500,000 of improvements made. The new business owner presents those receipts to the property owner. Property owner presents them to the city pays the money, you know, let's say 250,000 of that. But the 250,000 does not flow through to the new business. Those improvements are going to stay with the property, whether that business makes it or not.
That's correct.
And so that to me is a problem. And that word gets around. You know, if somebody who is coming to downtown and wants to do another restaurant concept, they talk to the current business owners and they say, how'd that process go? You know, and the word gets out, well, I really didn't get the full grant. You know, the landlord kept X. So it sounds good on the surface, but it's not functioning as we'd hoped. Not placing blame anywhere or anything else. I just think it's an issue.
And the food and drink grant program is closed. You're hearing 4 grants today that were part of it that have asked for extensions in order to get to their CO, but we are not accepting any applications under that program. And every tenant and property owner, it was case by case and they've had different experiences. But the larger policy question I think you bring out is, what is the CRA's role? Is it to support the business or to support the property owner? Or both? And our underlying assumption was our focus is on having spaces ready, no matter what the tenant is. We want improved spaces because that's the infrastructure approach versus we want to attract and fund a specific business idea or a specific business owner. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that was the underlying policy assumption is no matter what, CRA funds will be used to make sure this property is improved. It could be ready for any tenant.
Okay, all of this document that we got, this is just for us?
Yes.
Okay. Then I won't point out another issue. Just one or two more things. And maybe
What you meant, this document is just for us? What does that mean?
this portion of the report, there's,
The PDF part?
there's a spelling error.
Oh, okay, all right.
I
But
was
mean,
gonna
it's-
point it out if we're giving it to anybody else. If we are
We'll
not, then
go through and triple check that.
there's
again.
no reason. Well, under one area, it says part, under planned on page 4, second bullet, it should be partner.
Yes,
And then on the 115 South Martin Luther King Junior Avenue project, it says brewery plus compost site. This might be something I've missed. What, can you explain that one to me?
sure. So over the pre-COVID, we were in conversations with the community garden, floating around the idea of having more of a farm type operation, a more intensive agricultural operation. And then also talking, working with Sheridan Boyle, the sustainability coordinator, on how do we create an entire life cycle, right, of growing food, serving the food in restaurants, taking the food waste, composting it, feeding back into the garden, creating that kind of life cycle. And what a lot of people don't know, and I certainly wasn't aware of until I went down to Eckerd College and saw it on site, is that compost, when done correctly, is tidy, it does not smell, and it can be pretty compact. So we thought, depending on, there's a couple of options on here, but breweries produce a lot of food waste. So it kind of makes it a natural partner that they could create compost on site from their waste that then could tie into the garden, that then could tie into the restaurants, and just part of building that kind of unique brand that's special for Clearwater to have a closed loop food cycle.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Vice Mayor, did you have one?
Yeah, I just had one. We were talking about the lighting program for downtown, and I understand the companies from Canada and trying to bring them down is difficult right now. I had written a comment, I think, to the city manager about can we extend the tree wrapping lighting because that looks so nice down there. I've had a lot of comments on that, and then I got the comment back saying, well, it's not good to have it all the time because after a while the trees grow and that try to strangles them off. So I'm going to ask that maybe we extend it for 3 months and then take a look at it, where we are.
It is extended through April.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
We have done that.
Anything else on this item? 4.2. Yes.
Have a public comment.
Okay.
I do need a motion to adopt what we presented.
Are you going to read or a comment on this item?
Okay, basically, I've written numerous emails regarding this policy for the past 3 years, and I'm very much, I like promoting businesses. I own a business in the CRA. I've seen people almost get killed numerous times. There's a VA apartment complex next to my bike shop. A lot of those people are handicapped, and they try to get across the street to get to the food shop, and they get almost run over all the time. So you guys have been promoting businesses and restaurants and breweries, and that's fine. I like businesses, I do. But nothing has been done up there, and it's a sham. It really is, and it's a shame on you guys, especially the ones that have been here for numerous years, from past administrations through the last administration through now, because nothing was done up there, okay? And so, you guys are going to accept this program. I know you guys are. You guys are going to go for it. But just remember that there's residents that live here. There's blight everywhere. I did census this year, and I went door to door because there were a lot of people that didn't register for the census. There are so many dilapidated buildings in the CRA. It's awful. You go into some of these apartment complexes, the windows are falling out, the gutters are falling out. It's horrible. So when you guys are making a vacant list, please include the vacant homes and properties. Don't just stick with the 400 block, the 600 block, the 500 block, because the CRA is not just this little DDB area. It goes all the way up to Highland and goes all the way this way and that way. And you guys just, you don't do anything. And I'm tired of writing emails. I'm tired of getting back run for the mayor, I live in this community. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I would like to sell my property and move, but I don't want to because I'm waiting for the streetscape to get done. Then maybe I'll sell everything and get out of your hair. All right? So please do not insult the people that live in the community anymore, and don't belittle us. We're the ones, I don't have the $100,000 to fix up my business. We've never gotten, anybody come in. Howard's come in a couple times, maybe introduced themselves, but no one goes up there. That whole little area where you guys are gonna do the Mercado, I go to those businesses. I buy my lunch there a lot in that little Mexican restaurant up there. They don't even know anything's gonna happen. No one knows what's going on, so
Thank you, Ms. Florida.
that's it.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
See here. Okay, this is an update on the request to look at the cost and staff time for a registry of vacant properties. There we go. Okay. So the mayor had brought up in the last conversation really what is the goal of this overall approach, and my understanding, which I want to verify with you, is that our policy goal is to reduce the number of vacant properties in the CRA's commercial corridors, really looking at ground floor and standalone buildings, right? So we're not worried about the 6th floor of a tall office building. We're not concerned about residential at this point with this approach. So, okay? And so what that would entail is collecting information on which properties are vacant and contact information for owners, which is available now. We can do that through site surveys and through public records. We can compile that information. And again, I have this spreadsheet here created a while ago by a previous employee that I'll clean up and send out to you guys so you have that historic data point, and then we'll update it. And this is just for the 400 through 700 block, so we need to expand a little bit. Also, even whether you have an ordinance or not, we can ask property owners why they're vacant, but we can't guarantee that they'll respond or that information will be accurate. And if you have an ordinance, you can find them and say, you didn't even try to answer this question, but again, we can't verify its accuracy. So the simplest approach would be that staff prepares this database of property addresses and contact information. We estimate that'll take about 40 hours of staff time. Once you have that good database built, it's about 10 hours to update it. We can publish it on the CRA website and provide it upon request, right, and provide it to you guys. No change in ordinances. This is something that we can build into our work plan and want to anyway, to track vacancy. So that would be your kind of minimum approach. If you want to add a registry onto that, meaning that we contact the property owner and say, you give us information and tell us more things. If staff handles it in-house, creating and mailing that form, and we have this experience because we just sent out letters to every single property owner in the CRA and another letter to everyone in the op zone. It's about 40 hours of staff time, $5,000 in direct cost for that mailing. Then processing forms, compiling responses, another 40 hours. We could or could not charge a fee for doing that, and then of course there would be all the finance, everybody's time, right, for handling the money. So again, that's still kind of on the voluntary side. If you want to require it via ordinance, adopting new ordinance and fee schedules, you're looking at about 80 hours of staff time, your ad fees, your public hearings. Enforcing the ordinance, and this is very difficult to predict, right? Enforcement, maybe everyone complies. Maybe no one complies, right? And then you have the letters and ads and hearings and follows up for enforcing those fines. Really the biggie here too is just communicating the new ordinance, right? We don't magically understand things that happen up here. We have to put a lot of time into letting our property owners know this is a new law, a new requirement. And Michael Fuino had contacted 3 different cities, West Palm, Sanford, and City of Miami. They use a provider called ProChamp that runs a vacant property registry. They collect $100 for each property out of whatever fee is charged. And the staff still has to prepare a database of property addresses. They send that database over to ProChamp, then ProChamp does the mailing, creates a fillable PDF form, and does all that follow-up to get the information, the property owner's contact information, whatever else we want to ask them, and then they turn that back over to the city. And they do that on an annual basis. So, and just thinking about your overall goal and these approaches, if we do the staff, we've got a list and contact information. We can think about how to incentivize response to the mailing, like with the opportunity zone. We said, hey, if you give us this information, we're gonna market your property for you on a broad scale. You're looking at 100 hours of staff time and $5,000 annually if you want to do the mailing. If you don't, then that cost goes away. Ordinance driven, we'll set fines and fees that are paid by the property owner, so that's an additional cost to them. You're looking more 300 hours of staff time and for setup and management. And then the enforcement, it's just going to depend on who complies and who doesn't, how much staff time that takes. By impact, staff-driven, which is what I'm recommending, it's informative, it's not punitive to property owners. We can experiment to try and obtain better information. It gives us a chance to build relationships if we are doing that annual reach out, and we can update as needed versus once a year. Ordinance driven, it is a punitive action and we can't escape that fact. Doesn't guarantee quality information. It's not a positive relationship builder, and the information isn't necessarily shared with the real estate market. Could be once a year, but if it's staff and we say, hey, real estate brokers really don't know what's going on, so we're gonna send out this list, every 4 months via a special listserv, we could do that. Any questions?
Questions for Ms. Thompson? Councilmember
Oh, sorry.
Beckman.
If you want to leave that on there, so there are a number of questions. So especially with the ordinance-driven, it doesn't guarantee quality information. Well, neither staff-driven or ordinance-driven guarantees that a property owner is going to be truthful.
That's
right?
correct.
And then, no opportunity for positive relationship building for ordinance-driven. It seems to me that we have tried and tried and tried for positive relationships. And I think when we talked about this a couple of months ago, it was we need to do something to get these buildings occupied. And your first presentation was all about reaching out and downtown champions and all that positive stuff that you've been doing, and now we're going to do some more. And I think this is another tool in the toolbox. And then this information is not shared with the real estate market. I would hope that this information is available to every resident. It's public information. And so if real estate agents and they want that information, they should be able to access it just as easily as anybody who lives here. So we're thinking about the overall goal, thinking about incentivizing responses. Well, again, the basic information is it occupied or not? I mean, that's really what we really want to know. If they have intentions and whatever, I mean, are they going to say, yeah, I want to sit on it for 5 years and try to triple my profit? I mean, are they really going to write that? But your 300 hours of staff time with the ordinance, again, I think we have to look at if this company in Miami or West Palm, City of Miami or West Palm or whatever is charging $100 per registrant, it is going to be a little bit punitive. And I think we need to weigh how much money are we going to be getting in from a registration versus how many hours of staff time it's going to be, And so, I see you've got a recommended of staff listing. I'm leaning towards ordinance-driven, and I think I'd like a little more information on how it's working for these other 3 cities that Mr. Farino looked at. What are their expenses, what are their successes, and just to make that decision.
Well, and I'll ask Assistant Attorney Fuino to come up to share directly, but there's a distinction between collecting the information and filling of vacant properties. And so what we're showing here with ProChamp is, yeah, they can collect information all day long. But that's where it ends, right? And then it would be back on staff, right, to use that information in the most appropriate manner. So, do you want to come up?
Good morning, trustees. Michael Fuino, CRA attorney, and I did speak with the third-party vendor ProChamps about a month ago, maybe two. And essentially what the director said is correct. They will go out, they will collect the data for us. There's no upfront cost. It'll just be $100 registration fee for every property that is registered through it. So there's nothing upfront for the city to incur. But that's all they do. So you'll have the data, and then whatever they do with the data will be on the staff to decide what they need to do. If that answers the question, I think they.
I think so. So, yeah, we'll have the data then. So we have, let's say we have 800 buildings, and they're all registered, and we have 40% vacancy or whatever. And these are the addresses of where they're vacant and how long they've been vacant, right? And then what are we going to do with that data, right? Are we going to target then those buildings and those owners and get to know what they're doing?
Don't go far, Mr. Fuino.
Pardon?
I said, don't go far, Mr. Fuino.
Oh.
He was leaving.
Sure, and so the CRA strategy right now has two focuses. One, we are putting most of our time and money into city and CRA owned properties and getting those spaces filled and those spaces developed. Then we are also developing grant programs that incentivize filling vacant spaces. We also have a wide range of temporary programming like the wearable art exhibit, right, that reduces blight. So it's short-term, medium-term, long-term approaches. And that's why we had the list of barriers, right, persistent vacancy. We have to intervene at all those different points. So from my perspective, are we going to get staff to collect this information at no additional cost to a property owner? Are we going to enter into a contract and charge a property owner to give us this information?
Mr. Fuino, did you talk at all further about the success of the projects down in those other cities? I mean,
Yes,
has it met their objective?
Yes. I spoke with third-party vendor. Now, they do vacant property registrations for about 200 local governments across the country, includes 10 in Florida. I was able to speak with 3 of those municipalities, Sanford, Miami, and West Palm. Basically, the code compliance managers and directors for that, for those municipalities. And they do, all 3 did agree that from a code compliance perspective, the vacant property registry has been a positive because they're able to identify the properties and keep eyes on them, and when problems arise, they know who to contact and what to do. So from a code compliance issue, there's been success in terms of the vacant registry issue. In terms of overall investment in downtown, I couldn't necessarily tell you that.
Okay. Ms. Aiken, did you have something to add?
I did want to get some clarification. If we go the ordinance route, staff still has to provide the information to the contractor, is that correct?
What,
Yes.
if I may, what the third-party vendor has so told me, Ms. Aiken, is that they do have their own means of collecting information, such as return mailing receipts and things from the postal office. What they said was that the easiest way to collect the information is to get it directly from the staff.
It was just making clear how much staff involvement would be required, even if we go to the ordinance path.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I mean, I've got mixed feelings about this. I don't like having vacant properties in our downtown. I don't think it's healthy, obviously. We are still making certain that all of these buildings are code compliant, correct? And when we go out and serve them with code violations, we find out who the owner is, right? That's who we cite. As I said, I hate having buildings vacant, but I also strongly believe in private property rights. I mean, if people do whatever they want to do on their property within our ordinances, then that's frankly their business. I don't think it's rational for somebody to sit on a piece of property for years and years with it being vacant. But we've seen it. I can point to properties in our downtown for years that have been sitting there vacant. I have no earthly understanding of that from a business standpoint, and I have several business degrees. But to continue to pay taxes and some level of maintenance on them, and insurance and other things, and not have a viable business in them is illogical. But we've heard some people believe downtown's going to take off. In fact, we heard from one this morning. They want the city to make investments so their property values go up, and then they might sell them and be more enriched than they are today. So that may be occurring throughout the city. I just don't know that this is actually going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is we want vacant properties to be utilized with businesses. I prefer going the staff route. I think it accomplishes it. I also believe more in carrots than I do in sticks. I think this is a stick approach, and I think we ought to operate with carrots and show positive momentum, which goes back to that virtuous cycle that we were talking about in the last item. I think that is going to have the greatest effect to reduce vacancies. But if people want to leave properties vacant, that's their prerogative. I think it's irrational, but, so I prefer to go with the staff route rather than the ordinance driven. That's my standpoint. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you on that. I think that the ordinance-driven one would help code enforcement, possibly, because that's what you told me. But to have the CRA pay for that, I mean, really what we want from the CRA is to let these people know that we know that they have property, and we should know that. As a CRA, we should know what's going on in our CRA. So I think by getting a list and contact information on vacant properties is a good thing, even though they aren't really required to really give it to us. We can ask, and we should. So I think that's the first thing we should do is go ahead and do that, get that out there, and then we can take a look at it in maybe 6 months to a year, see how that looked. If it meets our objective, and if it doesn't, then we can think another approach.
Councilmember Hamilton.
I guess to put it in layman's terms, I'm kind of looking at the carrot and the stick. I think we start with the carrot with the staff approach, and if we don't get the results we're looking for, then we always have the option of taking it to the next level with the ordinance approach. So start with the carrot. Hopefully we don't get to the stick, but if we do, if that's where we feel like we need to go to really get the results we're looking for, we can take that action at the appropriate time.
Councilmember Bunker.
So it sounds like carrots or sticks, there's no guarantee we're going to get any answers. So, don't quite see the point here, but staff would be fine with me.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 4.2?
I have.
I'll come back to you, Councilmember Beckman, if that's all right.
Kathy Flaherty, again, basically, I think there should be a list of vacant properties, but I think it should be all the properties, and I think one of the things that was brought up last time was it had to be code compliant, and right now the city of Clearwater does not have a very vigorous code compliant department. They do one annual sweep per year, and basically it's more, if you see a problem, then the citizen is supposed to report it to the code department. We went through this big discussion a couple weeks ago through an email, and basically it was laid out that the city of Clearwater does periodic sweeps once every other year through certain areas, and then the rest of the time it's, if I see a problem, I'm supposed to call code enforcement. Well, I don't want to call my neighbors and report them. My neighbors don't really like me now because you guys did a sweep and a couple of them were reported and they think it was my fault that I turned them in. So I think the CRA should, like you have an interlocking agreement with the police and also with Downtown Development Board, do one with the code department where the CRA in this little area has, basically you guys make sure these properties are up to code. If they're vacant, they're vacant. But at least make sure they're up to code and have a code department that actually finds out if they're up to code. The CRA staff does not know codes. And I mean, Mike Howard can't go and tell the business if they're up to code or not. You have to involve code enforcement. So that's it. Thank you.
We are a complaint-driven city for the most part, where we do get a lot of information from citizens who are near properties that may be out of code, and our code enforcement people go out. Personally, I would like to buttress our code enforcement department because I think it is one of the issues that goes to quality of life. So it may be one of the few things that Ms. Flaherty and I agree about. Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I am all for property owners' rights, and I don't think that by going with the ordinance, we are, prohibiting them from doing anything they want with their property. It's simply a registry of your vacant property, and they will pay a registration fee, and that registration fee cannot be punitive. And so that registration fee will cover the cost of administration. So when we're talking about these hours and the cost, can't that be built into our fee schedule? And so it really shouldn't be a cost to the city, correct?
No, it's a question of whether we want to put more fees on businesses.
Right. We want to put more fees on property owners who do not lease their buildings. That's what it is. It's not fees on businesses, right? This is a vacant property registration
It's
fee.
property owners. We're putting another fee on property owners.
Property owners, right. Okay.
But they're just, there's lots of property owners that have businesses in their properties, so it would be.
But they wouldn't, this is a vacant property registration
I think
fee.
it's all properties, isn't it?
No, this would be if your property is vacant.
Right.
Oh, just vacant
So
properties?
Then
you've
you
got
would
enough.
pay a fee, whether that's, $150, $300, $500, whatever that fee is, accounting for all the staff across departmentally it takes to administer the ordinance.
Right.
But some properties have partially occupied spaces, all owned by the same person. So they would in fact be paying the vacancy fee.
They can pass on the cost
Yeah.
to their tenant.
Okay.
Well, wait. What do you mean? They have some
Well,
property owners
let's
that-
take, for example, the 500 block.
Right.
On the north side of the street. You've got a property owner that has a restaurant in one of the parcels. The rest of her parcels are vacant.
Right.
So she's a business owner. She would be paying for the vacant parcels that are on her property. But she also has occupied space as well.
So it'd be prorated some way or distributed some way. But I would say to you, when you say it makes no sense to me that people are paying insurance and taxes on property that they've kept vacant for years and years, I have the exact same question. But if they have enough money to pay taxes, insurance for years and years on a building that they're not leasing, they certainly can pay my non-punitive registration fee, right?
They could. Councilmember Beckman, my question is, how does it benefit us? How does it get us closer to getting an unoccupied space occupied? If you can answer that for me,
Yeah,
if it makes a difference between our staff doing an inventory versus the staff doing an inventory and then sending it on to a third party to send letters out, and that gets us closer to our objective, I'm in.
yeah, I agree.
So-
And I'm a carrot person too, I'm not a stick, but I also am looking at the years of the city trying to revitalize downtown, and things haven't worked, and so this is something different. And so I just,
Do you
I'm
see
a
my
hold.
question, though? I mean,
yeah,
Can you-
I do. Oh, absolutely. There's no guarantee, and right, it's just information. We're not even walking away with a profit because it can't be punitive, so we're not making any money or anything, right? But it's a public-facing initiative, and inventory, you know?
And we are seeing signs of success. And we have with the food and drink program, you know, with that program, the restaurants that have opened, that have filled vacant spaces. I think you come from a much stronger position when you say we're willing to be a financial partner that's gonna hold you accountable, than you do saying, we're gonna charge you $150 or $200 to show you we're really serious about knowing your property is vacant. I mean, it really is about the messaging, right? Because we can get the information multiple ways. So as you as CRA trustees, the message that you've been consistently sending about downtown is we're doing major public investments. We're willing to partner with people who want to partner with us. And we're going to continue down that path. I mean, that's been a very strong message that you all have been sending collectively. And we want to keep, I would like for us to keep going down that path. And not get distracted by, you know, a minor fee that no one's gonna change their life because they had to pay $250.
I mean, I have clients, and one of my, the things that I do on a weekly basis is I call so many clients for no reason at all. We're not making any changes. We're not recommending anything. We're not worried about anything. I think our staff and all of the personnel, frankly, probably need to be calling on several property owners per week, just as a check-in. I mean, Ms. Flaherty said she's never seen many people out there. From our staff, I think being ambassadors to those businesses and reiterating the fact that we do want to partner with people, and not with a letter, you know, not with a signage that we put out or something else, but an actual body, where we're talking to people and making certain that they understand that there's opportunities out there. And we are serious about turning the CRA around, the entire CRA. So I would accept a motion.
I think in this case, we just need direction.
I'd prefer to memorialize it.
Okay.
So moved.
What's your motion then?
Move to go with the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.3.
Okay, Mayor, if it is all right with you, I have Renese Johnson here from NM Residential Development, and she would like to show you their latest renderings of what they're doing for each of the spaces, kind of give you a little overview, and then we can go into the extension of the grant request. And I'd ask if Eric can help me find, he's out in the hall, the presentation. Eric. Right back.
Let's take a 7-minute recess because this is really kind of our halfway point. And that'll allow the staff to get all of the visuals ready for us. We'll take a 7-minute recess. having fun?
They'll stand too.
Emailed you, there was a link in the.
All right, we are on item 4.3. Ms. Thompson, do you want to do an introduction?
I do. I've just asked the development team from NN Residential to give you a brief overview, since many of you were not here when this grant was first initiated, of why they bought the property, who they are, what they do, their current project status for all three of these grants.
Good morning, everyone. So I am Matthew McWilliams with actually Envision Development Management Services. We're the owner's representative for the three projects. Bernice Johnson is here with me with Envision as well. NM Residential is the operator of the apartment project. Just wanted to give you a quick rundown who we are, kind of reinstate what the project is, and then progress made to date. Envision is, again, the owner's representative and construction managers for these three projects. Currently have over 2,000 units under development right now. We've completed over 6,000 to date with a combined value of over $1 billion. We have experience across the board: multifamily, retail, mixed-use development, hotel, office, and senior living. So there's three projects that we're talking about today. Two of them are markets. One of them is a brewery winery concept that's just over 5,500 square feet. We're actually implementing a iPort system, which is a self-serve beer and wine business. It's kind of a new concept. I think there's only a few of them currently in the U.S. Over 40 beers and over 40 to 50 wine dispensers total. The second part of the market hall is a micro tenant space, very similar concept to the Plant Street Market in Winter Garden, if you guys are familiar with that at all. So arts and crafts vendors, food vendors, up to 7 different spaces. Also planning for a Topgolf simulator in that space. And then it's all obviously going to have access to the brewery and winery, and that's coming in just under 3,500 square feet. And then the third one is the cafe. We're calling it a coffee shop dessert bar. It's about 9,800 square feet. We're actually in discussions with Foxtail right now to actually operate that coffee space for us. Just to touch on who the owner is, owner NM Residential, the team currently owns just over $1 billion in assets. They've rehabbed and built in new construction over 10,000 units to date. Most of their properties are between Ohio, and now they're expanding in Central Florida. So this project is part of the owner's vision. They're hoping to expand kind of the downtown sector further west, bring more foot traffic. And the plan for this is to be more of a destination center rather than just capturing within the community, but also bringing people from afar. So this is a long-term investment for the owner. I just wanted to mention that the owner does own and operate these spaces long-term. It is not planned to be sold. So a little bit about the project. About the updates to date. So COVID has obviously slowed things down, but I just want to make it clear our efforts haven't diminished since we've started this. We were brought in by the owner to get us through permitting, to design this space, and to manage the construction of the project. So we've always been on board. We're currently, I think our biggest hurdle getting this done is the issuance of our building permits. We submitted for a building permit back in May of last year. We received our latest round of comments just a couple days before Christmas, and now we are on our third resubmission. I just wanted to also mention the first round of comments we received was actually quite substantial, and we actually had to take our three projects that were currently combined with construction drawings and break it up into 3 separate sets of drawings, so our architect had to go back to the drawing board and repurpose that. DBPR applications are all submitted, and then we also have a general contractor submitted to complete the project. We did submit a formal RFP to 4 contractors, and we have selected DMAR General Contracting. They are a local Clearwater-based company. Let's see here. So contract negotiations are complete, pricing is complete. This project is essentially ready to break ground upon permit issuance. We actually had a call with DMAR yesterday. I just wanted to mention too that the start of this job would create 16 new jobs with total salaries coming in at over $832,000 over the life of the project. Anchor leases are still in place with the moved opening, and then ownership financing is still in place to get this deal done as well. Then the last update I wanted to give you is just quickly related to the apartments, not so the market or the coffee shop. But the apartments are currently 94% leased, 91.2% occupied. The owner has invested over $1.5 million to date into this property, mostly with upgrades and repairs related to waterproofing, remediation of construction defects, and then security system access control upgrades. Okay. And with part of this project, simultaneously, we're going to be breaking ground on live-work units on the first floor of the building that are currently vacant. So we've just completed construction drawings for those 7 units, and we are going to be in for permit and hopefully constructing those at the same time. So I'll open it up to any questions you guys might have about this.
Any questions?
I have just one.
Councilmember Beckman.
Thank you. When you said you had updates on permitting, and did you say that the third set of comments were very extensive?
The third set of comments were not extensive, and I believe we have addressed all of the comments except for one, which is related to shop drawings for fire sprinklers.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about parking? I mean, if you want this to be a destination, so people are coming from outside the downtown, are you going to be able to use some of the Walgreens, former Walgreens parking? Obviously, we have some parking at the corner of MLK and Cleveland. Is that going to be adequate to your demand needs that you're hoping for?
We believe so. So there's kind of two, I guess, areas of clientele that we're targeting. A is internal to the development. I believe it's a 257 unit project. So they already have parking in place, so they can access the facility pretty easily. There's parallel parking along Cleveland Street, and then there's also the new parking lot just on the north side of our property with handicap spaces included as well that we believe will be sufficient.
Staff believes that as well. I mean, I know we have parking requirements. I don't know if Ms. Clayton or Ms. Thompson wants to address that. Parking is always an issue.
It is, and that is why the CRA did successfully do that land swap to get that parking space on the corner to help the retail and residential in the bottom of the Nolan and Apex 1100. And ultimately, the new parking constructed as part of the South Washington apartments will replace that. So then longer term, that parking lot can be redeveloped. With the update of the downtown zoning, there is no parking requirements for commercial properties. The owners and developers are allowed to propose what they think will work for them.
Have we made any improvements to that parking lot at the corner?
Yep, we've removed dead trees, it's been resurfaced, restriped.
Okay. And is it going to be metered or free?
Right now it's free, but that's a conversation. Haven't thought that far. We wanted someone to use it first, and then we were gonna think about whether or not we should charge. I mean, we'll wanna recoup cost to pay for the maintenance at a minimum, but we're gonna wait till the business is open and then have that conversation.
We haven't seen any people using it from Apex or the Nolan?
Very
overflow?
rarely, very rarely.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. So I need a motion to amend.
I make a motion to amend the loan to grant agreement.
Is that- oop.
To extend to March
Oh,
1st, 2022.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.4.
Okay, so this is the second address, amend the loan to grant agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the property at 1011 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to March 1st, 2022 for building improvements to implement the CRA Food and Drink Grant Program and authorize appropriate officials to execute the same. So this is the second of their 3 properties.
Any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move to amend the loan to grant agreement to extend the agreement to March 1st, 2022.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.5.
Amend a loan to grant agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the properties at 1017, 1023, and 1029 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to March 1st, 2022 for building improvements to implement the CRA Food and Drink Grant Program and authorize appropriate officials to execute the same. And this is the third and final grant extension for the Nolan.
Questions? Motion?
Move approval of agenda item 4.5.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.6.
And so this item was a tenant food and drink grant agreement. There were 4 of these, I believe. So this is asking to temporarily reopen the food and drink business tenant program for the purpose of renewing the loan to grant agreement with 4C LLC, DBA Black Brick Tavern and Kitchen at 432 Cleveland Street, and authorize appropriate officials to execute same. Brian Ongst Jr., the owner's attorney, is here if you have any detailed questions. I will say that because we had given an extension before, when the grantee came back to request another one, I said I could not recommend approval until they had received a CO and opened for business, because the construction process was so complex. So they have asked prior to this, and I asked them not to come until they had opened, although, we are supportive. It's a reimbursement basis. They've spent the funds. So with that.
Any questions for Ms. Thompson or the applicant? Food's good. People ought to try it. Very nice ambiance. I'd recommend we go forward. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve agenda item 4.6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Anything else for the CRA?
I just have one little question I wanted to ask about that last one. Why did it take so long to get that,
They're walking out the door.
the Black Brick Tavern? I mean,
We'll have them follow up with you directly.
that sounds good.
It's long.
okay, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Thompson?
Look for Public Comms made a wonderful video about holiday extravaganza. I'm over time. I'm not going to show it now. Look for it in your email. It's amazing. Many good things happening. That's it. Look for more emails. Thank you.
I would suggest that when we have CRAs on the work session agendas, that we start those meetings at 8 a.m.
I agree.
I agree.
No disagreement here?
Okay, so going forward, sorry guys, I'll buy coffee. Let's do that on work sessions that we have the CRA. Because, here we are at 11, 2 hours later, and we're just starting the actual agenda. Okay, so we'll adjourn the CRA, reconvene the work session. Item 3.1.
Approve a revocable sub-license agreement between the City of Clearwater, Clearwater Historical Society, a nonprofit corporation, and Cairo Performing Arts Cultural Center Incorporated, a not-for-profit corporation, for use of the Plum House, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Hubbard.
Morning, council, managers, and city staff. My name is Christopher Hubbard, Cultural Affairs Coordinator for the city. This is a revocable sublicense agreement between the Historical Society, the city, and Cairo Performing Arts Cultural Center. Cairo is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to community service through the arts. In doing so, they create a platform for undiscovered talents in the areas of theatrical performance, vocal music, and film. All of their activities at the Plum House will be in compliance with the deed restrictions of the Ed C. Wright Park deed. Prior to general public access, Cairo, at its expense, agrees to repair and restore the Plum House to conform with the appropriate building codes and regulations. Cairo is also responsible for general house maintenance and landscaping in the immediate vicinity of the house and all utilities, including water, electric, and telephone. The city will continue to maintain the park surrounding the house, including mowing the lawn and other landscaping. Any improvements done by Cairo become the property of the city upon the termination of this agreement, and this agreement expires on June 26, 2022. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Hubbard, Vice Mayor?
Well, mostly a comment. This has been a long time coming. I know the Historical Society has had the Plum House, which actually was at a museum before they did the lease with the school board for South Ward School. That house was moved there, and it's a good museum to see what houses look like in the 1800s, the Plum House. But when they moved out, I think it went in disrepair, and I know we've been talking about this a long time, so I'm glad to see this finally come to fruition. And I really think that what they're doing, K-Roy, is going to be a real service for the neighborhood, so I'm real excited about that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Beckman.
Just for public record, I'm super excited about this, and if, and this nonprofit organization, I looked them up online, if they need help working to clean that up or paint walls, I would jump right in and help. They can contact me. Excited about it.
Consent?
Yeah.
4.1. Thank you, Mr. Hubbard.
Thank you.
Disband the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and adopt Resolution 21-02. Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. This is a bit of a housekeeping item. The Affordable Housing Advisory Committee completed its work in December 2020. We will incorporate their input into our local housing assistance plan, which we'll begin drafting later in the coming weeks. We are now able to terminate board member appointments. This is now an annual process. In late summer, I'll present a resolution to appoint a new committee for the 2021 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Questions, please.
Questions for Mr. Lane? Councilmember Beckman.
I just want to make it clear, to people who are watching or may be concerned, that this is a different committee than the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Committee, that advisory committee that'll continue to advise us. And so this was formed for one purpose, to review the annual HUD documents, correct? And we did that, because I was part of it, did that in early fall, late summer, made recommendations, and then we voted on that. So if people are concerned that we don't have a committee that looks at affordable housing, we do, and it's still active. This is something different, right?
Yes, this is a state requirement. It's not on the HUD side, it's on the state side.
Oh, sorry.
So it's state statute.
So we'll discuss this further on Thursday night. Thank you, Mr. Lane. 4.2.
Approve a management agreement between the City of Clearwater and the Greater Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce, DBA Amplified Clearwater, to provide visitor information services at the Clearwater Beach Visitor Information Center for the period of February 1, 2021 through September 30th, 2025, at a cost not to exceed $317,265, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Sanderson.
Thank you, Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing. And I'll be very brief with this item. There's a lot of attachments to it, so if there are any detailed questions, happy to take those. We did release RFP number 02-21 on October 8th. We received one response from the RFP, and it was due on November 6th. We were late in getting this out, in part because of other activities related to COVID-19, but also in part because we wanted to see how the statewide referendum went on minimum wage requirements. The responding firm, Amplify Clearwater, did indicate to us that they were unable to extend the current agreement because of pending wage increases. We built in some flexibility into this agreement, and so funding, as you see, has a not to exceed figure that is different than what we've done before. They've been operating in the space for many, many years at $50,000 per year. We wanted to cook in a little bit of flexibility so that we could address both wage issues and the still yet to be determined impacts from COVID-19 as it relates to tourism down on our beach. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Sanderson? Councilmember Beck.
I noticed that on the agreement with Amplify, on page 16 of 25, they have a list of all their expenses, and they don't include the utility expenses there, but in the contract, it says that they're required to pay utilities. And so it stuck out to me because, I always ask, do we have solar on this building? And if Amplify is going to be paying utilities for this small building, it'd be great if they didn't have to pay a huge electric bill. So I noted that. I don't know if I'm not looking in the right place or whatever, but, when I looked at their operating expenses and the profit and stuff that they would make, I'm wondering if that, who's paying the utilities? Because I think in the contract it says they do, but I don't see it in their list of itemized stuff.
That may be an oversight. Let me look into that, and if adjustment needs to be made
Okay.
before Thursday, I'll be able to do that.
Thanks.
Yes.
Anything else? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, where are we pulling the money for this? General fund?
Yes, sir. It is in this year's budget. We do have it budgeted for this year in our operating budget, and it will be allocated in future operating budgets.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can this stay on consent? Get you the information on the utilities, or do you want it pulled?
As long as I get, some information between now and Thursday, sure. It can can be on consent.
Well, it can always be pulled off consent
Right.
if you don't feel comfortable with the information that's provided by staff.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Consent then?
Yep.
All right. 4.3,
Approve the contract for purchase of real property by the city of Clearwater, of certain real property located at 1011 England Street with a purchase price of $350,000 and total expenditures not to exceed $391,000. Authorize the appropriate officials to execute same together with all other instruments required to effect closing, and approve the transfer of $391,000 from general fund reserves of first quarter to cover the cost of the purchase. Mr. Lane.
Thank you. Again, Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. This property is the site of the Springtime Elks Lodge in North Greenwood. You are all aware of the efforts the city is making to try to improve the economic and socio-economic conditions in the North Greenwood community. Much of the state and federal funding we receive for housing and community development is invested in this neighborhood. Recently, council approved taking the first step in creating a community redevelopment area in North Greenwood. If successful, a CRA would create a dedicated long-term funding source for investment in the community. The effort to create a CRA was a community-led initiative that City Council responded to with unanimous support. This acquisition is a very exciting opportunity to help facilitate commercial development on North Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, which is the main commercial corridor running through North Greenwood. The commercial portion on North MLK is about a third of a mile long, and it struggled with minimal commercial activity over the last several years. This site, if cleared, would be the largest commercial development opportunity along this commercial corridor. The city owns adjacent parking and also owns a vacant commercial lot across the street that provides for additional development opportunity. I'd like to thank Mr. Curtis White for reaching out to the city and presenting us with the opportunity to purchase the property. Mr. White is the newly appointed president of the Elks Lodge, and he's working hard to rebuild the organization, which is experiencing financial difficulties right now. His hopes are to reestablish the club on a more suitable piece of property. Mr. White and I worked together at length to try to find a way to lease the property back to the Elks Lodge at no cost. Unfortunately, the repairs needed to make the building safe and habitable are too high to make this happen. These necessary repairs are also the reason staff is recommending demolition of the building. This item calls for the use of general fund reserves in an amount not to exceed $391,000. That is $350,000 for the acquisition price, $35,000 in demolition costs, $5,000 for a survey, and $1,000 for closing costs. The property was appraised at $350,000. I'll take questions, please.
questions for Mr. Lane? Any new information about that remainder property?
No, sir. Not at the
Okay.
moment.
You know, when I met with the folks that are in favor of the CRA up in the North Greenwood neighborhood, which I fully support, I did tell them that one of the things that would probably have to occur the city would probably have to prime the pump somewhat in the neighborhood for things really to work. And the CRA has not yet been approved, but I believe this is a step that we need to take, but it is also one that is starting to prime the pump. This is in anticipation of approval of the CRA. I just want people to know that the city is already making an investment in that direction. So, consent?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, 5.1.
Approve the reallocation of funds budgeted for co-sponsorship events that were canceled due to COVID-19 and allow funds to be used for newly requested smaller special events that meet COVID-19 protocols, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Chris Cook, Events and Athletics Senior Manager for Parks and Recreation. This item today is obviously due to many events being canceled this year due to the COVID-19. Back in July, you had approved the annual co-sponsorship budget. So this item, we're asking to be able to reallocate those funds to new events, to recruit additional events, or to help out those deeply impacted by the pandemic in the event industry. As we said, there will be no additional funds asked for this. We're going to be reallocating funds that have already been approved. The process for this will be the same process that's done to, that first comes to you when you get a chance to approve the item or not. So we're going to follow that same process with the special event committee, reviewing and making recommendations on that. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Cook, Councilmember Hamilton?
Is the special event committee comprised of staff or Parks and Rec Board or a combination thereof?
Yeah, the approving committee for this is from somebody from the police department, 2 members from Parks and Recreation, somebody from the fire department, and then Chris Hubbard from Cultural Affairs.
It's a staff.
Staff.
Yes.
Okay, would it then go to the Parks and Rec Board before it comes to us, or straight from the committee to us?
It goes straight from this, assuming you approve the item today, it would go to that board. If they recommend that the event is approved for it, then it would go straight to that event organizer.
Councilmember Beckman?
So I think the Parks and Rec Advisory Board doesn't weigh in on any of this.
Not on the special event or the
Okay.
co-sponsor.
And then how much money are you talking about, the funds that go back? About, is there a ballpark?
So there are still, unfortunately, there's still events that are being canceled that we're part of, so we're not gonna have a final amount until we know which events are canceled, but just in the last couple of weeks, the Sugar Sand Festival unfortunately canceled. So there are quite a few high dollar budgeted items that aren't gonna be happening, so from what we're looking at and what we're talking to in the community, we don't anticipate that all of the funds will be passed along and utilized, but having something there to be able to go towards new opportunities is what we're asking for, not necessarily to use all of those
Right,
funds.
but how much are how many funds, what's the
Um,
we're talking about?
So from between Parks and Recreation, the police department, fire department, parking, all the different departments, I didn't bring the approved total there today. I can get that for you, but it was on the July agenda item, the total amount that was approved.
Okay,
It's usually $500,000 or so,
I mean,
isn't it?
Yeah, and this last year was, I think, 600 to 700, but I don't,
Okay.
okay.
not 100% sure. I'd have to check on
It's
that.
serious money though still. I guess my point is, as I was thinking about this, it's tragic obviously that a lot of these events have been canceled. Sugar Sands, Sea Blues, the list goes on. And I understand we have the funds and they haven't been used. I want to be very thoughtful about reallocating those funds and figuring out the bang we're getting for the buck. I would rather hold those funds in many instances until we have a large percentage of the population that's been vaccinated, and then maybe spend that money in the recovery effort rather than, picking up a few events that may not be as fruitful for us.
Okay.
I'm going to leave that to your discretion, but as far as a philosophy on that, that's kind of how I feel like we ought to keep more dry powder until we can actually use it and really be effective out on the beach and in downtown and around the rest of the city. And that point is going to come. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now getting close. Once that is out into the marketplace, I think we're not going to have these supply issues anymore, and then it's just going to be a function of people who want it versus those who don't. And at that point, I want to be able to use those monies. So that's just my thought. I don't know if you all agree with me or.
I agree. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested personally in sponsoring a one-time event type thing with these funds. Most of these are for recurring. What we approve in July is almost annual recurring events that have, proven to be good investments of our money. I don't necessarily want to be chasing one-time events because of COVID that, may or may not be good. So it's going to have to be a really interesting one. And I'm sure the committee will look at it pretty much that same way anyways, but.
Well, with Coachman being out of service, that's going to make a difference too, because that's one of the places we expend money. Mr. Horn, you had something to
I'm
add?
going to ask Chris to tally up what's remaining on the current council-approved special events agenda item, which takes us through the end of September. We will be coming to you with another agenda item that gets us beyond, or into the next fiscal year. So that will give us an idea of, quite frankly, what's really on the table. And then, I mean, I'd be surprised if we get a lot of interest, but we'll see what happens.
Anything else? Consent?
Yes.
5.2, thank you, Chris.
Approved not to exceed increase of $160,000 to Hilltop Securities, Inc. for spring training deal structure consulting services provided by Icon View Group, LLC, DBA, CAA, Icon, as subconsultant to Hilltop, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, staff, Jim Halios, Director of Parks and Recreation. The item we have before you is for an extension to our agreement with Hilltop Securities, Inc. and subsequently CAA Icon for our advisement services. In April of 2019, staff engaged with Hilltop Securities and subsequently CAA Icon to do a comparative analysis study for spring training sites. We came back to you again in September of this year, of 2020, to ask for an extension to this agreement to bring the advisors on board to help us with negotiations in these processes. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and then the complexity of a tripartite negotiation, we are coming back asking for another 6-month extension with a not to exceed amount of $160,000 to continue our negotiations with the Phillies, the county, and ourselves to get the agreement in place. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Halios? Councilmember Beckman?
Okay, so when I was reading this, Jim, they're now asking for $160,000 to help us negotiate any improvements to the facilities. Is that what they're focusing on? That's my question. And they're going to subcontract with CAA Icon for this, Hilltop is. And then this contract is not expected to cover the entire scope of work, it says. It's like, we don't anticipate that this is going to cover everything. And so there is an expected extension of this contract beyond $160,000. Is that right?
Well, again, it's just going to go back to the level of how far we're going with our negotiations. We're getting into the part now, I think, where we're going to sit down with our partners and talk about the framework or the parameters of a deal. So as we go into these discussions, staff feels that we are a long way off on certain items, then staff has the ability to get with Hilltop and CAA Icon and kind of do a pause. And then once we have that pause for effect, the meter's not going to be running anymore. Hopefully we won't have that. And again, 6 months, and when we talk about the scope of the project, they're talking about just the overall deal in the term sheet, what we're looking at. So scope does include some improvements, but it's also more so just the negotiation of the project itself, and then on the 20-year lease agreement, whatever would be operating expenses, rent, things of that nature that are paid. So that's what we're addressing. Now, yes, it could take longer than that, 6 months. We always want to put that caveat in there because these are complex negotiations. But, staff, the idea is hoping that, going into, I think, on the Phillies end and on our end, we wanted something kind of spring, summer to be done by then. So again, we didn't want to back ourselves into a corner by saying we're definitely going to be done in 6 months.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Well, I think, this is, there's 32 cities, 32 spring training agreements throughout the country. There's a lot of proprietary information associated with these that we don't have that these people do. So this is important information that, for us to have to be able to negotiate an equitable solution and an equitable contract between us and the Phillies to maintain and continue a 75-year relationship that has proven to be very beneficial economically to the city of Clearwater. So this is an investment an investment in that proprietary information so that we can make sure we end up with the best deal for us, and one that the Phillies are happy with as well, and we can continue to move forward. So I'm in support of this, and it's $160,000 in the overall picture of what the Phillies are worth to our community is a small investment, and I'm fine with it.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we weren't really armed with on the negotiation at the beginning is just what are the other cities paying for their baseball? And that's where ICON, I think, comes in, as Mr. Hamilton said, that they're familiar with all that inside information, and it gives us a little more ammunition in our belt to say, this is, we're not just throwing numbers out there, we can actually put numbers out. And it's all not just about the stadium, it's about what other cities are paying, for their baseball. So I'm for this. I think it's a good money spent, and I'm hoping we'll always have a good relationship with the Phillies, because the economic part of it, I really do think is good for Clearwater.
Councilmember Bunker?
Yeah, these guys know what they're doing, and I think we need their expertise. So I'm for it.
Well, I think it's a case of we don't know what we don't know. And I think they do give us information. This does have a lot of moving parts. There's 4 funding partners in this process. To have the city, the county, the state, and the Phillies to look at similar models, which is pretty much the case with all of the 32 franchises that Councilmember Hamilton mentioned. They're all working with similar structures where all 4 entities are putting money in. I think this gives us the right knowledge that we need to go to the table and get a reasonable deal for everybody. And ultimately, the question is, how valuable do we think the Phillies are? I do not want people to diminish a 75-year relationship. We're the second oldest relationship in Major League Baseball, and there are a lot of spin-offs to the relationship that we know exist, aren't always easy to quantify, but I think this whole process is helping clarify that process. So I'm willing to spend the additional money, and hopefully we're going to get to the table soon with all of the partners and come to a conclusion about what the deal is, and then we'll vote on whether we want to go forward and where we're going to find those resources to make it happen. I can tell you right now, being your TDC member, a little bit more time is not going to hurt us, because the lack of clarity from a bed tax standpoint is a real issue for the TDC. And the more vaccines we get out, and the more clarity we have on what is going to happen with recovery and how people's traveling habits are going to rebound, I think there's going to actually be pent-up demand. I think we're going to be extremely busy once vaccines are widely spread, because I think people are tired of being at home and they want to go on a trip and they want to fly there. And I think we're going to benefit from that. That's why we need to continue to make certain that our beach is a great, safe destination. So, Councilmember Beckman.
Just to follow up, I just want to be clear. I don't want to be, intentional or otherwise characterized as not supporting, an agreement with the Phillies, because I am. My question was more focused at the subcontracting with CAA Icon, in that I thought with Hilltop that we were hiring them to do this negotiation, and they would have that expertise to do all parts of it. And so it just struck me as now they're subcontracting with another organization to get proprietary or other kinds of information. I thought that's what Hilltop was doing. And so it's just like when I contract for something, a renovation here or this or that, I like to have all my expenses up front before I make a commitment. And I when people come back to us again and again, well, we need another 160, we know what 180, we need this and that. It's like, I'd like to have that up front. And that's why I pointed out that there is a statement in the contract that says this contract is not expected to cover the entire scope of work or whatever, and they're going to be asking for more. Just saying that I'm about knowing where the money is and what the expectations are with the agreement.
Sure, and to provide a little more clarity on that, Councilmember Beckman, one of the issues also that is provided in there is the drafting of the contract. That is one thing that they are not going to do. We have our own counsel that we've used. Last time it's Brian Miller Olive, is that correct?
Bob Reed.
Bob Reed, who is familiar with that. So that's kind of one of the things that we specifically put in there in the beginning, because we wanted somebody that had that knowledge of working, with the state and the county and the Blue Jay, he had previously worked with the Blue Jays. So he has that local knowledge working with the county and the Major League Baseball team. So when you look at that, that's what they're talking about. It's not a soup to nuts. They do the negotiation, they write the contract, and then they help execute the contract. They're just handling the negotiation part. And then you kind of, once we start moving along and its volition picks up, that's when we bring in Mr. Reed to help us with that. So that might help give you a little bit more clarity on that.
Okay, thank you.
So consent?
Yep.
Please.
All right, 5.3.
Approve purchase orders to Miracle Recreation Equipment Company of Monette, Ohio for the purchase of playground equipment in an amount of $136,894.18 pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances 2.5641D, other government entities, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios again.
Jim Halios, Director of Parks and Recreation. The item that we have before you is for a contract with Miracle Recreation, asking for an additional $136,000. The city of Clearwater has 27 playgrounds in its inventory. Staff inspect these playgrounds on a bi-monthly process, and we have a proactive CIP program for replacement of parts at said playgrounds. And during this fiscal year, we had identified 7 total playgrounds that needed to be refurbished and replacement in certain areas. With the funds with the current PO that we had previously had, we were able to do 2 playgrounds. So now we're coming back to you for an additional approval of $136,000 on a PO with Miracle to do the remaining 5 playgrounds. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Questions for Mr. Halios? Consent?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. 6.1.
Approve the Pinellas County Combined Mutual Aid Agreement for Law Enforcement Services for the period February 1, 2021 through July 1st, 2025, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Slaughter.
Good morning, Council Mayor. It's Dan Slaughter, the Chief of Police. This is a renewal agreement for the Pinellas County Combined Mutual Aid Agreement that will extend it through 2025. It provides the legal authority for the law enforcement agencies to provide voluntary cooperation to each other, to respond to requests for assistance. It provides the authority for officers to take action outside of their jurisdiction in a very specific and narrow circumstances. It also provides for a mechanism to request or provide resources when a law enforcement emergency exceeds the capacity of the local agency, or to just make a more efficient response. The officers, when they're acting under this agreement outside our jurisdiction, are still governed by our policies and our rules and regulations. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the chief? Consent? 6.2.
Approve a memorandum of agreement between Bob Altieri as Sheriff of Pinellas County, Florida, and the City of Clearwater Police Department to establish a pilot co-responder program to handle mental health related calls for service and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Slaughter.
All right, this item is a pilot program for a mental health co-responder team. The Clearwater Police Department responds to 1,400 calls for service at least that involve mental illness, and I say at least because many of the calls that we respond to, there's an underlying condition of mental health, but it's not necessarily captured in the data that we mine. The officers are essentially equipped with 2 tools when it comes to dealing with mental health. It's their mouth and the Baker Act. And those are the only 2 resources they currently have. So we're seeking to enter into this agreement, this partnership, so we can have some additional resources for the officers to utilize when they come across mental health issues. This program would create mental health co-responders teams. There would be 2 officers that would be paired up with 2 crisis response specialists, so you'd have 2 units. These units would be responsible for responding to in-progress calls involving mental health or people in crisis. In addition to these response units, this partnership will give us the ability to have these follow-up teams that would be provided through the Sheriff's Department. And how that will improve ours is, as officers, whether it's the co-response team or just your regular officers, they will be able to flag calls now that indicate there is an underlying mental health condition, and we can follow up as opposed to this hamster wheel of a person necessarily getting Baker acted, hoping that they connect to resources. They'll actually follow up and try to make sure that that connection occurs. Our department's going to use existing resources to cover the 2 officers that we need for this program. The financial cost of the program is for the personnel expenses of the 2 crisis response specialists that will be employees of the Sheriff's Department. The cost of that is $143,200. And our end game, of course, is to have better outcomes in these scenarios and to avoid some of the dangers that exist. About 20% of your police shootings involve a mental health issue, and so we don't want that to happen. We want to do everything we can to avoid that. So more than happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I mean, I support this. Let me ask you 2 questions, though. How do you determine who to send? What are the triggers? I mean, you mentioned it, but could you give a little more detail on dispatching?
Okay, so the dispatch component. So as our officers or our call takers are taking calls for service, they actually screen already for mental health issues. And so, some of it is going to be very evident right from the beginning. You're going to have a family member that's saying, I have a person there in crisis. Those are going to be very easily flagged. They still ask questions like, are they on medication or anything like that? That is another flag. And then some of it's going to be instinct. If you have somebody that's acting just irrational and the call is coming in, then it'll be flagged. There are some logistic issues that we have to work out with the Sheriff's Department, with the comm center, and those things are currently being kind of identified to make sure that we get these units, these co-responder units, attached to the right calls. But it's very easily identifiable in our calls, the way they're flagged in the TriTech system, the CAD system, by topic, by title, and the dispatchers are going to receive training as well to make sure that they attach these particular co-responder units to that. We're going to have to, we're going to share a little bit of resources. So if my co-responder unit is busy and the sheriff has one available in Dunedin, then they're going to go ahead and send ours. So we're trying to work out those cross-logistic issues. Obviously, it would be much easier if my CAD project was much further along. So there are some things that are evident that would be advantageous for even something like this. But I believe we have some good tools in place to identify those calls and get the right people at the right location.
So there is additional training. The second question was, this is a pilot. How are you going to measure success?
There is a long list of data we're going to capture that we will that I can provide for you. It's probably more than I need, because in the end, it's I said it's about better outcomes, and that's not always the easiest thing to measure.
Sure.
The avoidance, but I'd like to see the officers having a reduction of repetitive calls. So we're looking to see that we're going to the same person multiple times, that we're getting them connected to services and we reduce the repetition, and then that we just reduce the overall number of calls, or at least start to get that number to subside. So that, that's the generic ones. The rest of it we'll look at. We don't want to put people with mental health conditions in jail, so we're going to look at that data as well to make sure that they're actually getting connected to services and not going to jail as opposed to getting treatment. But there's a whole litany of that, so I surely can share you. It's a long one page.
Okay. Other questions for the chief? Councilmember Bunker?
Not a question, but just a compliment. I'm happy to see this pilot program starting up, and I hope it's a great success.
I'm good. The chief and I have had this discussion already.
All right, Councilmember Beckman?
I would echo Councilmember Beckman's. I'm super excited about this and applaud you for working to get it going. 2 things. Couldn't we use as a measure of success fewer Baker acted individuals? Would that be one, or?
Yeah, we believe, and that, I probably said less calls, but yes. It is my opinion, and I've had the conversation with the sheriff too, we both believe that we over Baker Act in law enforcement. We over Baker Act not because we're mean, we do it because we don't want to make a call and then go back and find somebody hanging from their shoestring in the garage. I mean, that's a lot of burden and responsibility on a 25-year-old to know that they cannot take action and somebody can be died. So we definitely think we over-Baker Act, and that's the advantage of the clinician and the crisis response is they're going to have a little better ability to gauge whether or not a Baker Act is necessary. So absolutely, that is a factor we'll be looking at.
And then when do you think it would start, the pilot? When do you anticipate it starting?
I regretfully disclose that I'm moving forward as if you all are approving this. I am sending personnel to training this week.
Okay.
And if it doesn't get approved, then I'll yank them from the training, but I am trying to get this thing up February 1st.
Well, let's take care of that. Consent?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Item 6.3.
If I could just make one comment.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot more guns in our community than what seems to be the case 20 years ago. A lot more guns. And these kind of situations that our officers and the social workers are going to be responding to people who have access to weapons. And if there's one thing that I really like about this is that I think we're putting the right people in the right place to address these kinds of highly stressful situations. So.
And can I add one more comment? I know you guys are really busy and you're late, but when I started this program, we put it out to our officers, and I was worried about interest. We had great interest. The officers want to do this. I mean, I have one officer that she is education that's right on par with this, and I think it's going to be a big difference. So I thank you for the opportunity to do it.
Great, Chief. Now let's move on to 6.3, which is another jolly subject.
Amendment Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 6.29, alcoholic beverages, closing hours prohibiting the sale of alcoholic beverages by alcoholic beverage establishments between the hours of 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. in Clearwater Beach, Sand Key, and Island Estates, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Chief Slaughter.
Okay, so this item was in response. We'd seen some increase in our number of calls and also received complaints about those calls into the late hours into District 1, which is Clearwater Beach. This led us to kind of analyze our call data, and from that analysis we looked at our data from August 2017 through September 2020, and we looked at the types and the times of the calls that were coming in. And what we found was when you compare District 2-3, which is essentially the mainland, to District 1, which is the Barrier Island and Island Estates, was that everywhere else in the city the calls began to significantly taper off starting at midnight. On District 1 and the beach, they stayed relatively flat up until about 3 a.m. and started to taper down. The type of calls we were seeing were alcohol-related calls, disturbances, drunk pedestrians, DUIs. The number of fights on District 1 is higher than the number of fights in District 3, which is everything east of Keene, so a significantly larger geographic area compared to District 1. So we looked at those type of calls and felt that kind of conflicted with the thing we're always trying to balance out there, which is this tourist district with your condo owners, your hotel guests, your rental properties, and even the family-friendly brand that we like to use on Clearwater Beach. From that, we looked at one of the tools or mechanisms to try to govern over alcohol consumption, and felt that an option for the council to consider would be to change the ordinance that governs the sale of alcohols and move it from 3 a.m. to 1 a.m. This is within your authority to do. The county allows it till 3 a.m., but you are allowed to be more restrictive. And we felt that the data only justified it on District 1 and not anywhere else in the city. And this only applies to alcohol sales too. There was some misinformation that went out that this applied to businesses in general and that they all would have to close at 1. Any business that's open at 3 can be open at 1, can be open at 2, and you just can't sell alcohol. You can sell food, you can have open night, poet night if you want it. You can do whatever you want. So there is no requirement for a business to change. We did meet with a lot of the community groups and discuss the topic, and it's kind of a lukewarm reception. It's kind of, it's really a 50-50 one. There was some requests by some of the bar owners that the city do an economic impact study to determine what that impact would be. There was request that maybe the council consider putting a sunset provision within so that it had either be rediscussed or automatically terminated. And then some businesses felt that, or some other residents and businesses felt that the increase in alcohol consumption was harming their business of a different nature, like an ice cream shop or some other nature. And just the ability to kind of generally enjoy the beach as a pedestrian. So it's kind of a mixed bag with the response. I'm sure maybe you all have had your own pulse of the community. It's a difficult one. It's one that, as I expressed to a few of you, that I'm concerned about the long game here and what Clearwater Beach will look like in 5 to 10 years if this alcohol atmosphere expands, because now that it's kind of proliferated with bars on Mandalay, I see the same thing starting to occur now towards Coronado, and that has me concerned. And obviously we dealt with a pretty significant complaint, you and I, over Christmas break about just the noise in a bar, and that stuff's always going to happen as long as you have a bar. It's not going to be much you can do about it. So we're more than happy, wanted to have this option put in front of you today, and so the ordinance has been drafted to change it till 3 a.m., but certainly you can make any adjustments or turn it down. But I'm here to try to help.
Well, Chief, I want to thank you for all the work you've put into this. And you and Mr. Horn meeting with different bar owners. I think it's in the Father's Handbook that they all tell you nothing good happens after midnight. My father said it to me, I said it to my kids, and then you add alcohol sales. I mean, it doesn't matter when you hear about somebody in the paper doing something stupid or illogical, somewhere in the article it'll always say, and alcohol was a contributing factor. I mean, that's just the way it goes, right? We've got a lot of different interest groups out on Clearwater Beach, from the residents that live there, to restaurant and business owners, our tourists that come into town, and our locals. And balancing all of those different interests is extraordinarily difficult. The goose that lays the golden eggs in this city. Anybody who thinks otherwise, come on in and sit for a half an hour with me and let me show you the tax receipts that we get from Clearwater Beach. It's our economic engine. That does not mean we ignore other parts of our city. Absolutely not. But understand that it is the golden goose. And you do not want to lose the goose. You don't cut down the money tree. And so that's what's concerning to me, is I think we're losing that family-friendly atmosphere. And you all know that a lot of the emails come in to me, and you see the responses, and to people that have been visiting here for decades. And they think that the atmosphere and that family-friendly moniker that we have is changing. I don't want to lose that. And it's really incumbent upon these business owners to get their act together, because they really are the gatekeepers in many ways. They can bring in extra security. They can train their bartenders that enough is enough. And don't tell me that the bartenders don't know. I've had too many friends that bartended in college, and after 6 months, you're not only a psychologist, but you certainly know when people have had enough. And I think this is getting the message across that it's not going to be tolerated, and we're not going to let these particular businesses screw up the beach. At least I'm not. And if we have to take action, we will. I am sad that it's come to this. And I think what I wanted to do today on this item was just to have some discussion amongst the council. But obviously, a lot of the business owners are going to be here on Thursday. They're going to want to express their viewpoints. So I'd just kind of like to get your feelings out in the air. Many of them are probably watching this either now or before Thursday, and that will give them an opportunity to get a barometer on what they're going to be dealing with on Thursday. So I'll just open it up to all of you. I've already vented my spleen. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, this one was a tough one. We have heard from a lot of different angles on this, and we did talk about a carrot and stick on one of the last items a little while ago on the agenda. And I've done a little research, I've seen some of the other municipalities around us. So personally, I don't really go out past midnight anymore. And I was surprised to see that the businesses and the bars are open till 3. I mean, when I was younger, the ones in Tampa were open to 2. I think we closed at 1 here. And so I think it's all expanded like that across. And I know all municipalities are looking for an even playing field because we don't want people going out and then leaving one place to go to another because it's open later. And that's what I think will happen. I think we'll get a lot more people on the road that shouldn't be. But last week, I did read the email from the city manager and the police chief. They had a meeting with a lot of the bar owners on the beach that we've been monitoring as problematic for a while. And they seemed to, the meeting was a good one. They seemed to say, look, we understand there's a problem. Let us take care of that problem ourselves. Which to me was a good thing. But I agree with the mayor that, I don't want to, first of all, we're going through some hard times anyway with COVID, and I don't want to put any more restrictions on our business than the restrictions we have now with COVID. I just think that would be unfair. So my angle, at least the way I'm thinking on this, is let's go ahead and give the businesses a way to fix this problem, put a time limit on it, say you've got 3 months, and by the way, the next 3 months are going to be right during our biggest period, spring break. So they know they've got to be better than they have, at least, well, I don't know, through, you said through September, I guess. I know we were having a lot of problems last summer. I'm not really sure from September to December or through January if that's been as bad as it was before, but I know we've had some issues. And the governor said that he's not, with what's happening on the beach, and I know alcohol's involved, that he's not really gonna, with the COVID thing, and arrest people for like being crowded and doing all that, but he's gonna hold the businesses responsible for that. So I would say, if the businesses can't fix this, and I say give them like 3 months to fix it, that we should be calling the state and maybe pulling some alcohol licenses for some of these businesses that won't cooperate. Put it squarely on the business owners and say, look, you better fix this problem, or you're not going to be in business, or you're not going to be selling alcohol. You'd be selling hamburgers, and that's it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, I don't disagree with you on the liquor licenses, but Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to cite a business how many times before we can go to the governor's office to ask for their license to be revoked?
Well, you're talking about citing for alcohol violation, not COVID. You're talking about just the psych. I have to even research that. We haven't done it in a while. And quite honestly, it's not a quick, expeditious process. The only one that I'm aware of that we dealt with, actually DC Gandy dealt with it. It took years before we got resolution from the complaints that we were dealing with. So, and that was for drug violations inside of a place that was selling alcohol. And we tried to. So it's a logical approach. It just takes a lot of time.
Okay, but it doesn't take a lot of time for us to say that we're not selling alcohol after 1 o'clock.
Right.
And we could go to that, when it becomes a problem and say, you fix it, 3 months, we're gonna look at it. If you haven't fixed it, 1 o'clock's gonna be your last call.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, wow. I think one of the biggest changes, and one of the things that we're dealing with now, Councilmember Albritton and I, when we were younger adults, years ago, the only two places on the beach, the only two bars on the beach were the Beach Bar, which is no longer there, and Shipwrecked. That was it. Now we've got numerous alcohol-driven businesses. And when I say alcohol-driven, I'm talking about places that sell more alcohol than they do food. You know, put the disclaimer out there right now. The Palm Pavilion's alcohol license says we have to sell more food than we do alcohol. Brown Boxers does not. So, you know, they're different businesses. But again, you know, it's the definition, and we're stuck in the middle. We as a council are stuck in the middle of this. None of us want to put a business out of business, but we also have a commitment and a responsibility to the residents of Clearwater. And you have a mixture of both out on Clearwater Beach. The bars, the bar operators, the bar owners, a lot of them refer to the Mandalay area and Clearwater Beach itself as an entertainment district. Well, no, an entertainment district is Duval Street in Key West, South Howard Avenue in Tampa, but neither of them have four-star hotels and million-dollar condos right across the street from them. They don't have it. So we have a different situation that we're dealing with. And I've had conversations with some of the operators out there, and I told them, I said, look, you know, we want everyone to prosper, but everybody has to, you know, it's going to take a community effort to do this, because in the end, the last thing you want to hear from us is, as Ronald Reagan put it, the 9 most feared words in the world are, we're with the government and we're here to help. You don't want that. You don't want us to impose what it's going to be. But, you know, we've got, you know, I've had people say, well, you know, the 1 to 3 o'clock, a lot of the hospitality workers that are in the industry, for the businesses that close earlier than that, it gives them a place to go to unwind. And I said, all right, well, using your philosophy of that, what about the people that are working till 3 o'clock? Do we need to have a place for them to go unwind after 3 o'clock? So maybe we ought to just be open 24 hours a day for alcohol, so everybody has a chance to unwind after their shift. No, it doesn't work that way. And so this is a tough situation, and I appreciate the meeting that was held last week that the mayor or the city manager and Chief Slaughter went to. And I think, from what I've been told, I think the message was received. But the only way we know if the message was received is if in the actions that follow. So I'm going to be interested Thursday night. I'll be interested to hear what everyone is saying, what the public has to say when they and have their chance for input. So I'm not here to say I know where I'm going with it, but you know, a collective effort to address the situation, because like I've told people I was meeting with, you know, we do have, and I've heard the argument, the county statistics show that family travel to Pinellas County is about 30% of our tourists. So they're saying we're not really a family beach. Well, we are a family beach. We branded ourselves as that. The 30% of the overall tourists that come into this town, into this county, we want most of those family businesses to think of Clearwater Beach as their destination. But we also have, you know, not a lot of families are paying what the Sandboro gets for a night at their hotel. But I can also tell you that people that are paying what the Sand Pearl charges probably aren't sitting in the Brown Boxer at 2:30 in the morning. So there's a balance there. And what we have, and I think everybody agrees, that alcohol in most cases, in a lot of cases, acts as an accelerant of emotions. And when that happens, that's when Chief Slaughter's people get called. And when they show up and you've got a confrontation between patrons and police officers, and all of a sudden it gets elevated to another level, you don't have people, it used to be when we were kids, people would jump in to break it up. Now nobody breaks in to break it up. Everybody hits record on one of these so they can get it on, so they can film it and put it on the internet. And 20 minutes after it happens, it's all over the world. And people are looking at that saying, if that's what's going on in Clearwater, I'm not going there. So we're trying to protect the brand versus we don't want to put people out of business. So it's a very delicate balance, and it's not as clear cut as the business owners think it is, and it's not as clear cut as some of the homeowners out there think it is. We're trying to find a reasonable balance, and collectively is the best way to get to that point. And I'll wait till Thursday night for the rest of my diatribe.
Councilmember Barker.
So, some of the very bar owners, bar operators that you were having a meeting with are repeat offenders, right? Like the brown boxer. You know, they should have learned a lesson by now, I would imagine. If we were to say, okay, we'll give you 3 months and that encompasses spring break, I don't see why they wouldn't just say, ooh, now is spring break. Now's where we can make all the money and we'll break all the rules we can. And if they come after us afterwards, fine. I'm just not sure that they're going to be the good stewards that they're saying they can be if we don't back it up to 1. I'm not sure that I want to cut them some more slack after we've seen them already break COVID rules.
Well, I don't know that the message was clearly received. Some people take longer to get a message. As one of my friends says, half the population is below average. Some people just don't get the message. I think the message is now loud and clear. I know that we have a couple bad actors out on the beach that are worse than others. I am very cautious about using one particular business that punishes everybody. That to me is more of an enforcement issue. I don't think we have just one bad actor out there. Would you agree, Chief?
No, I think that there's probably some that are more sensitive to the brand than others, and more sensitive to what their activity's like than others. Of the ones that this ordinance would impact, it's a total of 13. 11 of them are open until 3 a.m., 2 of them are open until 2 a.m., 13 locations. And often the brown boxer comes up, I think, because of, you know, and this isn't about the brown boxer.
I know.
This is about the total call volume. I mean, they clearly snubbed their nose during the COVID violations and basically said, we're going to make money, and they did that. But this is not related to COVID. This is a 2-year trend we've been seeing, that we've been looking at. I've expressed my concern long before COVID to Mr. Horn about the alcohol expansion on the beach. But I think it's, you know, you definitely have some that are open till 3 that aren't a problem. But we generally see repeated complaints from the public about the brown boxer, about the shipwreck, toucans, sometimes jammins, and a couple other locations. But they're Cocoa Crush, of course, recently one we dealt with.
Right.
That's about it.
Thank you. Councilmember Beckman.
I agree with most of what's been said. I would say to the liquor serving establishments, I'd like to hear what their plan is. So I heard that they met with the mayor and the police, I mean with, I don't know if you were involved, but a city manager Horn and the police chief, and they express some sincerity to try and do some things differently, and maybe they share their strategies so that they have kind of a uniform front. But it would be good to hear on Thursday what their plan is, show some evidence of some kind of unified front if they can gather that, and then give them a timetable, and then have a report from our police chief after some, you know, timetable to have them institute whatever plan they've come up with. So I understand they've asked for give us another chance, we have a plan, and so if we're gonna give them another chance, I'd like to know the details of the plan, the support of the plan, and the time frame of a plan. But I think the difference now is we've got this ordinance queued up, and it's ready to go. And, you know, if they don't follow through in whatever time frame, out it comes, and, you know, here we go.
Yeah, one last thing, Chief. I just kind of want to lay the groundwork. Because at one time, Hillsborough had alcohol till 3. And then many of the businesses in Pinellas County, we've dealt with this before, were 2. And we were thinking of keeping it at 2, and instead we went to 3 because we didn't want people from Clearwater going to Largo and then driving back to Clearwater after consuming at 3 a.m. So we did that. I think this is different. I think some of the problem makers that are coming out to Clearwater Beach once they know we're not open until 3 may not come. And then I do know that there are some people that get off work, as Councilmember Hamilton said, and that's when they cut loose. And those people, I know there's some that live on the beach, but a lot of them live on the mainland and they'll go elsewhere and disperse. But let's say that we gave them a reprieve. I don't know that 3 months is the right time frame, first of all. And secondly, going back to measuring things again, what would be the bar that they would have to get over for us to say, this has been a success, they get it, we've seen a decline in calls by X percentage, the types of calls that are most damaging, back to Councilmember Hamilton's point, that get videotaped and then go, viral, that really hurt the brand, what would you be looking at specifically? Because if we don't tell them what that is.
Right. I mean, I think we would definitely look at the call activity with regard to those that are disruptive, disorderly, disturbance, all the ones we kind of mentioned as the items that we're concerned. The problem we may have with that analysis is probably having an effective control group or benchmark because of the last year with the COVID. So I'm going to have to use probably, a different benchmark. We can definitely just look at a reduction. We can list numerous things that they can be done by each establishment and evaluate their implementation of each of those activities, much like the nuisance abatement process, and benchmark them against those particular items. We're going to continue to send people in plain clothes undercover into these locations as well, and to address it from that perspective. To everyone's point about, now you got their attention. We've been talking to them. We've been expressing our concern to them. Now they realize that 5 people in the council have said, basically, you better listen to the police department or else. They didn't have the or else. They knew that the state wasn't going to do anything, and they knew that it was an enforcement nightmare for us to do anything proactive. So I don't have any problems with any of the comments or anything I can implement. I can go either direction based on the feedback today, and we can certainly come up with some benchmarks for them to shoot for to establish what success is.
Well, I'd like you to think more about that between now and Thursday, and then I know that there were some best practices that were thrown out by one of the establishment owners. I'd like to see them put together a committee as well to talk about best practices and also to self-regulate somewhat, because they're all in this together. The boom's going to come down on everybody, and so I think some peer pressure is helpful.
Absolutely, yeah, and to the point even is, the peer pressure, and they better give some attention because I'll probably come back in front of you about noise in the near future if I don't necessarily see that to improve either.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will discuss this further on Thursday. Thank you, Chief. I'd love to get through 9.1 in the next half hour. And then we can do all the rest of the items, I think, on Thursday. And we'll limit the amount of staff that has to come back. So with that, if we don't get through it, we don't get through it. That's fine, but that's my goal. 7.1.
Awarded construction contract to Central Florida Contractors, Inc. of Seminole, Florida, per invitation to bid sidewalks project in the amount of $750,000 for an initial 1-year term with an option to renew for 3 1-year renewal terms on a unit price basis, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Elbow.
Good morning, Mr. Horn, Mr. Mayor, council members. I am Bennett Elbow, Senior Engineering Specialist with the Engineering Department. The 2021 annual sidewalk construction project's objective is to continue maintaining and providing quality walking surfaces for the city of Clearwater citizens. 3 contractors submitted bids, and Central Florida Contractors, Inc. is the lowest responsible bidder. The city has utilized Central Florida Contractors, Inc. on a previous annual sidewalk contracts, and they have provided quality work in a timely manner and competitive pricing. The contract will include 3 one-year renewals at the city's discretion. With that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm looking at the bid tab. Central Florida Contractors bottom number is 868,000, yet we're issuing the contract at 750. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And the reason for that is we've used Central Florida Contracting in past contracts, and on average, they've utilized about $750,000.
Okay.
So does that,
Well, we've got a not to exceed number of 750, so if we exceed that, you're coming back.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Hi, Elliot Schoberg, the Assistant Director in the Engineering Department. When we bid these contracts, we typically bid them for a generic type of amount. You know, we put in 100 linear feet, and they're not all set on certain places. So this one, we downsized to 750, so we don't expect to come back to you for any additional money.
But if you exceeded 750, you
Yeah,
would.
we'd have to, yeah.
Okay. Vice Mayor, you had a question?
no, that was my question. I was just wondering how that was figured. So I guess your estimate of so many linear feet of concrete would probably be a little high, and they only do less than that. But whatever the total for the year is would come in at 750, not the 800 that they was figured in the bid. I understand. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I have just a little comment. As my learning curve continues, so I called Elliot, or I spoke with Elliot from engineering about the DMAR General Contracting and Development, which is a disadvantaged business enterprise. That's why that DBE is there. So that was an understanding for me. And I wanted clarification on why that contractor, which is a local contractor out of Clearwater, had all of these yellow highlights for the item in yellow have been corrected, so miscalculation. And one of the things I learned was that this miscalculation was like a whopping maybe $65 or something, but that this contractor probably extended out the price calculations by a couple of different extended decimal points, and so that it's not a reflection. Because when I looked at it, it's like, wow, did these guys make errors on all these entries? And it's not necessarily, these big errors. And then, while I'm a proponent of awarding things to disadvantaged business enterprises, their bid tab amounts were really significantly different than the one we're going with. That does have a good reputation. And then the last thing that I've learned, and this is a question I still have, is a lot of residents complain about sidewalks. And so where these guys are doing large projects, Elliot explained that a number of times the complaints that come in are from independent developers that fix this or that on different parts of the sidewalks throughout the community. And so I guess my question for today, and it's just a follow-up, is do we have a central location or database where all resident complaints about sidewalks are kept? So we can pinpoint, do these big contracts that we award for major sections, are they getting complaints, or is it these little one-off things around that get all the sidewalk complaint, or get a majority of the sidewalk?
It's the one-offs.
But that's for later, but that's just, I don't, it's learning. So I'm okay with this for consent.
Okay, beautiful. 7.2.
Approve an easement subordination to Florida Department of Transportation for the purpose of maintaining a digital message sign in the vicinity of Nursery Road, US 19 North, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Brzak?
Robert Brzak, Real Estate Services Coordinator. The proposed easement subordination will provide the FDOT with property rights necessary to maintain their electronic traffic sign that will provide travelers information. Staff have reviewed and have no objections.
Any questions? Consent? Item 7.3.
Continue to February 4th, 2020. Wait a minute. February 4th, 2021.
Yeah.
Approve staff request to vacate an alley located within the Clearwater Gas Complex at 777 Maple Street, described as all of the platted alley lying within Block 10 of Jones subdivision of Nicholson, addition to Clearwater Block 7, 8, 9, and 10, as recorded in the Plat Book 4, page 82 of the Public Records of Hillsborough County, which Pinellas County was once part, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, when I looked at the aerial view, I found it strange that this is classified as an alley, and I wanted to know why this wasn't done years ago and what is the impetus for doing it now? Those are the questions I had. It's a weird looking piece of property in the middle of everything.
This is basically the cleanup, the current gas complex. The reason why it wasn't done years ago, I have no idea. But this is to clean up it's no longer necessary for municipal use. And with the new gas complex, the new buildings and so forth, we need to clean this up and reduce it. As far as why is it an alley, a lot of times we classify things as alley with that right away. It's kind of the same thing, alley, right away. It's kind of a paper street per se.
So did somebody just discover it recently, that that's the way it was? Did somebody just discover it recently, that that's, why now?
When we replatted the gas complex, or which we're, currently doing, that was noticed, and staff recommended that we vacate it.
Great. We'll vote to continue it on Thursday. 8.1.
Approve the annexation, initial future land use map designations of residential low and water drainage feature overlay and initial zoning at list designation of low medium density residential district for 2776 North Terrence Drive, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Mr. Brother.
Thank you. Kyle Brotherton, Planning and Development. So this case involves a voluntary petition for annexation for one property totaling 0.204 acres. The property is currently occupied by a single-family dwelling, and the owners are requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The owners are aware of the sewer impact and assessment fees that must be paid in full prior to connection, and of the additional cost to extend city sewer service to the property.
Questions? Okay. We'll talk about that further on Thursday. Item 8.2.
Approve a future land use map amendment from the residential medium and residential urban categories to the residential low medium category for two parcels located at 1280 and 1298 Lakeview Road, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Mr. Guevara.
Good morning, Diego Guevara, Planning and Development. This future land use map amendment involves an 8.908 acre property consisting of two parcels located on the north side of Lakeview Road, approximately 950 feet east of Missouri Avenue. The addresses of the properties are 1280 Lakeview Road with an area of 8.767 acres, and 1298 Lakeview Road with an area of 0.41 acres. Cobblestone One CTC LLC owns both parcels. The request is to change the future land use map designation of the 8.767 acre parcel, referenced as parcel number 1 in the staff report, from residential medium to residential low medium, and the 0.141 acre parcel, referenced as parcel number 2 in the staff report, from residential urban to residential low medium. Parcel number 1 is occupied by a mobile home community developed 60 years ago and currently has 113 mobile home units and a clubhouse office. Parcel number 2 has most recently been used as an administrative office. The current land use designation of parcel 1 as a residential medium allows moderate to high density residential to a maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre, but it is inconsistent with the existing mobile home park. Zoning designation with the mobile home park zoning designation which must be retained to allow for the existing use of the property. The current future land use designation for parcel number 2 as residential urban allows for urban low-density residential to a maximum of 7.5 dwelling units per acre. The proposed residential low-medium category allows for low-moderate density residential and residential equivalent use as a maximum density of 10 dwelling units per acre. The mobile home use is only permitted in the mobile home park zoning district, which is only compatible with the residential low-medium future land use designation. The applicant is seeking to amend the future land use designation to bring the property into compliance. A request to rezone the parcel number 2 from medium density residential district to mobile home park district is also being considered concurrently with this case, which is the next case. The request amendment will bring consistency between the future land use designation and zoning district for parcel 1 and will allow for the existing building on parcel 2 to be used as the park clubhouse. The Community Development Board approved at its December 15, 2020 meeting a request from the applicant to terminate the existing mobile home park's non-conforming status related to density and setbacks, dependent on the City Council's approval of this case and the REC case. While the amendment to residential law future land use is required for consistency, this category permits fewer units per acre than the existing residential category. The actual density on the site is 13 dwelling units per acre. However, no additional units are proposed. Also, suppose the property in the future is redeveloped. In that case, the number of units allowed will be constrained to 10 dwelling units per acre, which is approximately 89 units as limited by the request future land use designation. The proposed residential low medium future land use designation is compatible with the residential urban future land use to the north, east, and south, the residential high future land use to the northwest, and commercial general future land use existing to the west across Adams Avenue. Let me show you some of the, this is the location, the actual aerial photograph. Sorry, this is the next set of drawings. This is let me see. Then this is the two properties, parcel 1, which is the large area, and parcel number 2, which is the small one here. Then this is the existing surroundings. Again, parcel 1, parcel 2. The future land use map designation.
So these are companion items, obviously, item 8.2 and 8.3. Any questions from the council?
I did have a couple of questions. So I'm okay with the idea of combining two parcels to allow for the construction of a clubhouse for the residents. That seems fine. What I worry about is there's a sentence in there that states that should the site be redeveloped in the future, the number of units that could be constructed on the property goes from 132 dwelling units to 89. So my question is, and not, private property owners can make their own decisions, but why would I, as a private property owner, want to reduce the number of dwelling units and the value of my property? So I'm thinking in the future, could, affordable housing, workforce housing be built there? And now we've reduced the number of units from 132
Well, basically, in order to be consistent with the zone designation, they have to go through the future land use map amendment. And the change of the future land use designation makes the property, limits the density of the property to a less number.
Right, right. And I don't know that that's a good thing, you know, for our lack of housing, land for housing and stuff. But again, I mean, if you guys, you know, allow it, to me, it seems like the value of my property is decreased if I can't market it as being able to have this many units on it. That's all.
Do you have something to add?
Hi, Christine Fisher, Long Range Planning Manager. I just wanted to add that the existing density on that property is in existence, but the use itself is not allowed because it's not a mobile home park designation. So if the property owner had wanted to tear down the mobile home park, which they're not looking to do, and rebuild something more like apartments or something, they could do that within that density, but they're the ones that are seeking to rezone and expand their mobile home park in order to allow the clubhouse.
Okay, I just, yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. 8.3.
Approve a zoning atlas amendment from the medium-density residential MDR district to the mobile home park district for 1298 Lakeview Road, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Mr. Guevara again.
This zoning atlas amendment involves a 0.141 acre property of the north side of Lakeview Road, approximately 50 feet east of, approximately 1,250 feet east of Missouri Avenue. The address of the property is 1298 Lakeview Road. The parcel is currently owned by Coldstone One CTC LLC. The applicant is requesting the rezone of the property from the medium-density residential district to the mobile home park district. The applicant has submitted a future land use map amendment that we just did hear about it. The property is currently occupied by one-story office building, and the applicant's intent is to convert the existing office building on the property to a clubhouse for the use of the budding 130-unit mobile home park. The property corresponds to the parcel number 2 of the LUP case explained previously. The proposed mobile home park district is compatible with the surrounding zoning district, such as the medium-density residential to the east, the low-medium-density residential to the south, and the commercial district located to the west. Such districts include single-family and multifamily uses existing in the vicinity of the subject property. The request amendment will allow the parcel to be redeveloped with one dwelling unit or limited non-residential uses, included retail or office uses intended to serve the residents of the mobile home park. The Community Development Board reviewed this application at its December 15, 2020 public hearing and made an unanimous recommendation of approval to the Council. The proposed amendment is consistent with all the features and goals of the policies and objectives of the comprehensive plan and furthers the purposes of the Development Code and other city ordinances and actions designed to implement the plan. The available uses to which the property may be put are appropriate to the property, which is subject to the proposed amendment and compatible with existing and planned uses in the area. The amendment does not conflict with the needs and character of the neighborhood and the city. The amendment will not adversely or unreasonably affect the use of the property in the area, and the amendment will not adversely burden public facilities, including traffic, carrying capacities, or streets, in an unreasonable or disproportionate manner.
Any questions? All right, we'll discuss that further on Thursday. 8.4.
Approve a future land use map amendment from the residential suburban category to the residential urban category for 2250 Nursery Road. Pass ordinance number 9427-21 on first reading. Mr. Brotherton.
Thank you, Cog Brotherton, Planning and Development. So this future land use map amendment at 2250 Nursery Road involves a 0.875 acre property, which is on the north side of Nursery Road, approximately 645 feet east of Belcher Road. The applicant is requesting to amend the future land use designation from residential suburban to residential urban, and there is a zoning atlas amendment which has been submitted and being processed concurrently, which is item 8.5, case REZ 2020-10002. Property currently is a residential use and includes 2 buildings which were annexed into the city in 1999 as 2 residential units. Even though there are a total of 4 units on the site, staff has reviewed building permit records and determined that only 2 were permitted. The current residential suburban future land use permits a density of 2.5 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed residential future land use category permits a maximum density of 7.5 units per acre. This proposal would allow the property to go from 2 units to 6, which is an increase of 4 units across the site. And the proposal would also allow the property owner, or the property to become conforming in terms of density, and could allow the owner to request redevelopment in the future as attached dwellings through the residential infill project use. However, at this time, no site plan has been submitted. The proposed future land use of residential urban is compatible with the residential high future land use to the west, the residential medium and commercial general future land uses to the south. And since the property is not part of an existing single-family subdivision and is slightly larger than the typical single-family development lot, it would provide a reasonable transition to the residential suburban future land uses that exist to the north and to the east. Additionally, there's a stormwater pond adjacent to the east, which is within Pinellas County. That would provide for a buffer area between the low-density development, which is in the county, to the north and east, and that of the more urban development to the south in the city. The development to the west and to the south are mainly 2-story apartments, which are attached dwellings, and there is a small retail plaza to the south as well. And again, those developments to the north are larger single-family lots. As detailed in the staff report, the proposed amendment does not conflict with the goals, objectives, policies of the comprehensive plan. The underlying countywide plan map category would not be changing, so we would not need to go through that amendment process. This proposed future land use category is consistent with the categories in the area and is compatible with the surrounding uses and consistent with the character of the neighborhood. The proposed amendment would increase the demand on several public facilities, but it would not degrade those current levels of service. And finally, the proposed amendment would not negatively impact any natural sources on the property. And at its December 15th, 2020 Community Development Board public hearing, the Community Development Board made a unanimous recommendation of approval.
Questions? All right, we'll hear that on Thursday, 8.5.
Approve a zoning atlas amendment from the low-density residential district to the medium-density residential district for 2250 Nursery Road and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Mr. Brother.
Thank you. So this is the companion zoning atlas amendment case to case LUP 2020-10002. It is that same property located at 2250 Nursery Road, and the applicant is requesting to rezone the property from the low-density residential LDR district to the medium-density residential MDR district. The proposed MDR district is compatible with the surrounding zoning districts and single-family and multifamily uses that exist currently in the vicinity of the subject property. And again, that stormwater pond to the east would provide a buffer between the low-density and more urban density development in the county and the city. And again, the amendment could allow for the property owner in the future to request redevelopment as attached dwellings through that residential infill project use. And again, no site plan has been submitted at this time. As detailed in the staff report, it's consistent with the code and the comprehensive plan. It's in character with the neighborhood, surrounding uses, and the surrounding zoning districts. Proposed amendment, again, would increase public demand of facilities, but there is sufficient capacity, would not degrade those levels of service. And the proposed amendment's boundaries are drawn appropriately with regard to ownership lines, street center lines, and et cetera. And the Development Board at its December 15th, 2020 public hearing unanimously recommended approval of this item.
Any questions? All right, thank you. 9.1, Mr. Mayor.
Authorize an increase to contract 901066 to Florida Department of Management Services contract for Suncom long distance service, state AIN, Centranet lines, and toll-free lines in an amount of $30,000 for a new not to exceed amount of $164,220 for the period October 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2021 pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances Section 2.5641D, other government entities, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute such. Mr.
Mayor, Council, good to see you. We'll get this done before 12:30. This item you saw in September, and promptly in November, we received a letter that they had renegotiated their agreements with Frontier, having some increases in cost that we haven't seen on these services in quite some time, almost a decade. So the net, with the new charges starting in late December, early January, will be in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000. So we're asking for that increase now. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Mayor? None? Consent?
Yep.
All right. Well, great work session, everybody. Good CRA. We got to our goal, at least my goal. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody on Thursday. With that, we're adjourned.